The laughter started before I'd even finished my sentence. My brother Nathan threw his head back in our parents' living room, his hand slapping the armrest of the leather couch that cost more than my entire month's salary, and laughed like I'd just told the funniest joke he'd heard all year. Except I hadn't been joking. I'd been asking, quietly, carefully, swallowing every ounce of pride I had left, if he could lend me $2,000 to cover my rent. "You're serious?" He gasped between fits of laughter, wiping his eyes. "You actually can't afford rent? What do you even do with your money, Riley? Oh wait, let me guess. You're still trying to make it as an entrepreneur." He made air, quotes around the word, his diamond-encrusted wedding ring catching the light from the chandelier overhead. "That's rich. That's absolutely rich." My sister-in-law, Courtney, giggled from beside him, her perfectly manicured hand covering her mouth, in a gesture that was more performative than genuine. My mother shifted uncomfortably in her chair, but said nothing. My father looked at his phone, suddenly very interested in whatever email had just come through. And my younger sister, Maya, stared at her lap, her face flushed with second-hand embarrassment. I stood there in the center of the room, my worn jeans and 3-year-old sweater, suddenly feeling like a costume in a play where everyone else had received the proper wardrobe, the Thanksgiving decorations around us, the expensive cornucopia centerpiece, the designer, fall foliage arrangements, seemed to mock me with their abundance. This was supposed to be a family dinner. This was supposed to be a safe place to ask for help. But I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I didn't even let my expression change beyond a slight tightening around my eyes. Instead, I smiled. A small, controlled smile that I'd been practicing in the mirror for weeks, ever since I'd known this moment would come. "I understand," I said calmly, my voice steady as a heartbeat. "Thanks anyway." Nathan was still chuckling, shaking his head. "Man, I remember when you were so smart, so ambitious. Full scholarship to Berkeley. All those awards. What happened to you, Riley? How did you end up living in some tiny apartment, begging family for rent money? It's honestly kind of sad. You're living in that place in the Mission District, right?" Courtney added, her tone dripping with false sympathy. "I saw pictures online. It's like, 300 square feet? I couldn't even fit my shoe collection in there." 280 square feet, I corrected quietly. "But it works for me." "Works for you?" Nathan leaned forward, his smile sharp and cruel. "Dude, your entire apartment is smaller than my closet. That's not working. That's failing. And now you can't even afford the rent on your shoebox? Come on. At some point, you've got to admit you made some bad choices." "Nathan," Maya said, softly, her first words since I'd arrived. "That's not fair." "Not fair?" He turned to her. "What's not fair is watching our brother throw away every opportunity he was given. Full ride to Berkeley. Job offers from tech companies. He could have had what I have, the house, the car, the career. Instead, he's living like a college student at 32 and asking us to bail him out. Here's the thing Nathan didn't know. I wasn't asking him to bail me out. I was testing him. I'd known for 6 weeks that he wouldn't help me. I'd known because Maya had accidentally told me that Nathan had been joking about my financial struggles at his company's happy hour, describing my tiny apartment and failed entrepreneurial dreams to his co-workers like I was a cautionary tale he'd invented for entertainment. I'd known for 6 weeks that my brother saw me as a punchline, and I'd spent those 6 weeks preparing something he'd never see coming. "You're right," I said, and I watched his eyebrows rise in surprise at my agreement. "I did make some choices you wouldn't have made. Different priorities." "Different priorities?" he scoffed. "That's one way to describe being broke." I nodded slowly, like I was really considering his words. "I suppose being broke is a matter of perspective." "It's not a matter of perspective. It's a matter of your bank account. Can you pay your rent or not?" "I'll figure something out," I said. "I always do." "Well, don't come crying to me when you end up evicted. I warned you about this startup nonsense years ago. Should have taken that job at Google when you had the chance. Now look at you." I looked at him, really looked at him. My older brother, the golden child, the one who'd followed every expected path and reaped every expected reward. Stanford MBA 6-figure salary by 25. VP at a tech company by 30. Married to a woman our mother adored. Living in a 4-bedroom house in Palo Alto with a 3-car garage and a pool. On paper, Nathan had won at life, and he never let me forget it. "I should get going," I said, checking my watch. "Long drive back to the city? In that piece of crap car you drive?" Nathan laughed again. "I'm amazed it still runs." "What is it, like 15 years old?" 14. But she's reliable. She? Courtney wrinkled her nose. You named your car. That's so weird. I didn't bother explaining that naming your car wasn't weird. It was practical shorthand when you spent as much time working on something as I'd spent working on mine. Instead, I just smiled that same small smile and headed for the door. My mother finally spoke as I reached for my coat. Riley, honey, maybe you should reconsider. Nathan's not wrong about stability. Maybe it's time to get a real job, I finished for her. Yeah, I've heard that before. Thanks for dinner, Mom. It was lovely. You barely ate anything, she protested weakly. I wasn't very hungry. That was a lie. I was starving. But sitting at that table, being the object of my brother's ridicule while my parents said nothing, and his wife tittered like a backup track to his comedy routine, had killed. Whatever appetite I'd arrived with, Maya followed me out to the driveway. Riley, I'm so sorry. He's been awful lately. I don't know what's wrong with him. Nothing's wrong with him, I said, unlocking my 2010 Honda Civic, the car Nathan loved to mock, the car that had never failed me, the car I'd maintained myself because I'd taught myself mechanical engineering along with everything else. He's always been like this. I just finally stopped pretending otherwise. Are you really going to be okay? With rent? I looked at my baby sister, 23, and working her first job out of college, and I felt a surge of protectiveness. She was the only one in there who'd tried to defend me, the only one who seemed to remember that family was supposed to mean something. I'm going to be more than okay, I promised her. But Maya, can you do me a favor? Anything. In about 2 weeks, when things get interesting, remember that some people deserve what they get. She frowned, confused. What do you mean? You'll see. I hugged her quickly. And Maya, you're the only one in there worth the drive down here. Remember that? I got in my car, my beautiful, reliable, underestimated car, and drove away from my parents' house in the suburbs, away from my brother's laughter, away from the family that had just shown me, once again, exactly how little they thought of me. But as I merged onto the highway back to San Francisco, I wasn't thinking about their mockery. I was thinking about the meeting I'd scheduled for Monday morning. The meeting with the journalist from the San Francisco Chronicle who'd been investigating housing innovation in the Bay Area. The meeting where I'd finally reveal what I'd been building in my tiny apartment for the past 3 years. My brother thought I was a failure because I lived in 280 square feet. He thought I couldn't afford anything better. He thought I was struggling, desperate, pathetic. He had no idea that my tiny apartment was about to change everything. And when it did, when the news broke, when the world found out what I'd really been doing, while he'd been laughing at me, his laughter was going to die in his throat. Because some things are worth more than square footage, and some victories are worth more than money. I was about to teach my brother that lesson, and I was going to enjoy every single second of it. The drive back to San Francisco gave me time to think about how I'd gotten here. Not to the highway, but to this moment, standing in my parents' living room, being laughed at by the person who was supposed to have my back. The anger I'd suppressed in front of Nathan was bubbling up now, hot and acidic in my throat, but I channeled it into focus. Anger was just energy. The question was how you used it. I'd learned that lesson 3 years ago when I'd first moved into what everyone called my tiny apartment. They'd all thought I was crazy or broke or both. The truth was more complicated. After graduating from Berkeley with degrees in mechanical engineering and computers science, I'd done what everyone expected. I'd interviewed at the big tech companies, Google, Apple, Facebook. I'd gotten offers from all of them, impressive offers with generous salaries and stock, options that would have made my parents proud and my brother grudgingly respectful. And I'd turned them all down, not because I was self-destructive or stupid or afraid of success, despite what Nathan thought. I'd turned them down because during my senior year, I'd become obsessed with a problem that none of those companies were trying to solve. The housing crisis that was eating San Francisco alive. People were being priced out of the city. Families were living in cars. Teachers and nurses and firefighters couldn't afford to live in the communities they served. The average rent for a one-bedroom apartment was $3,500 a month, more than many people made in a month. And everyone treated it like it was just the cost of living in a desirable city, like it was inevitable, like nothing could be done. But I looked at that problem and saw an engineering challenge. I saw inefficiency, wasted space, outdated thinking. I saw an opportunity to innovate in a sector that hadn't meaningfully changed in decades. So instead of taking a cushy job writing code to make rich people's apps load faster, I'd taken the money I'd saved from internships and scholarships, found the cheapest legal housing I could in San Francisco, and started building. The apartment I'd found was in a converted warehouse in the Mission District, 280 square feet. Barely enough room for a bed and a desk by conventional standards. The landlord had been honest about its limitations. "It's small," he'd warned me. "Most people take one look and leave." But I'd taken one look and seen potential. The space was a blank canvas, high ceilings, 12 feet, good bones. And most importantly, it was mine to modify as long as I didn't damage the building's structure. The landlord, a former engineer himself, had been intrigued when I'd explained my plans. He'd agreed to let me experiment in exchange for detailed documentation of everything I built. "If you figure something out," he'd said, "I want to know about it." I'd spent the first 6 months just planning, measuring every inch, calculating load-bearing requirements, sketching designs on graph paper and modeling them in 3D software. I'd studied micro-apartments in Tokyo, transforming furniture in Europe, space-saving solutions from boat cabins and RVs. I'd read papers on ergonomics, psychology of space, and the relationship between square footage and quality of life. Then I'd started building. The first thing I'd designed was a wall system that wasn't a wall at all. It was a series of modular panels that could slide, fold, and reconfigure to create different spaces. With a few simple movements, I could transform my living room into a bedroom, my bedroom into an office, my office into a dining room. Each panel contained hidden storage, fold-out surfaces, and integrated lighting. The furniture was next. Nothing in my apartment was just one thing. My coffee table rose to become a dining table or lowered to become a footrest. My desk folded down from the wall and tucked away completely when not in use. My bed lifted into the ceiling on a motorized system I'd built from scratch, leaving the floor space completely open during the day. The kitchen was a masterpiece of efficiency. Appliances that nested into each other. A cutting board that covered the sink to provide extra counter space. Magnetic knife strips. Vertical storage that used every inch of wall space. I'd managed to fit everything a full kitchen needed into a space smaller than most people's pantries. The bathroom was the same. A shower stall that doubled as a laundry zone with a compact washer-dryer combo I'd modified to be more efficient. A mirror with built-in storage behind it. A toilet with a sink on top that used the sink's grey water for flushing, saving hundreds of gallons per month. But the real innovation was in the systems I'd built to make it all work. Everything was automated, controlled by a central system I'd coded myself. Motion sensors turned lights on and off. Temperature monitors adjusted heating and cooling for maximum efficiency. Water usage was tracked and optimized. Even the window shades adjusted based on the sun's position to regulate temperature naturally. I'd essentially turned 280 square feet into a smart home laboratory that functioned like a space 4 times its size. It had taken 3 years. 3 years of working gig jobs to pay rent while spending every other waking hour. Designing, building, coding, testing. 3 years of eating ramen and staying up until 3 a.m. 3 years of my family wondering what the hell I was doing with my life. 3 years of my brother laughing at me. I pulled into my building's parking lot and sat in my car for a moment looking up at the warehouse's industrial exterior. From the outside, it looked like exactly what it was. Cheap housing in a part of the city. The tech money hadn't completely gentrified yet. Nothing special, nothing impressive. Just like me, I supposed. At least according to Nathan. My phone buzzed. A text from Maya. "I'm sorry about tonight." Nathan was really awful. "Are you sure you're okay?" I typed back. "I'm fine. Better than fine. Tell you what, watch the news on Monday evening. I think you'll find it interesting." "That's mysterious. What's happening Monday?" "Just trust me. And Maya, thanks for being the only one who stood up for me. Love you, big brother, even if you are living in a shoebox." She'd added a winking emoji. I smiled. Maya got it. She understood that I was playing a longer game, even if she didn't know the rules yet. Another text came through. This one from Jules, the journalist I was meeting with Monday. "Morning. Hey Riley, still good for 10 a.m? I'm really excited to see what you've built." My editor is intrigued too. "Still good. You're going to want to bring a photographer. And maybe a camera crew if you have access to one. That confident, huh? That confident. Can't wait. See you Monday." I locked my phone and finally got out of the car. The walk to my apartment was short. 3rd floor, no elevator, down a hallway with exposed pipes and concrete floors. Industrial chic, some people might call it. My brother would call it a dump. I unlocked my door and stepped into my 280 square feet of brilliance. The space transformed at my command. Voice-activated lights brightened as I entered. The living room configuration I'd left in place that morning welcomed me. Couch folded out. From the wall, coffee table at optimal height, TV screen descended from its ceiling. Compartment. The whole space felt open, airy, comfortable. I told the system to switch to evening mode, and I watched as the apartment transformed. The lighting shifted to a warmer tone. The window shades adjusted to block the setting sun. The temperature kicked up a few degrees. Background music started playing at low volume. Jazz, my evening preference. This wasn't poverty. This wasn't failure. This was innovation. This was 3 years of work that was about to change everything. I'd been documenting the entire project, of course. Thousands of hours of video, detailed plans and measurements, cost breakdowns, everything meticulously organized. I'd also been reaching out to housing advocates, architects, urban planners, building a network of people who understood what I was trying to do. 6 months ago, I'd given a presentation at a sustainable housing conference. Just a small breakout session, maybe 50 people in attendance. But one of those people had been Jules Morrison from The Chronicle. She'd approached me afterward, her eyes bright with excitement. This is a story, she'd said, a real story. Not just about the tech, but about what housing could be, what urban living could be. Can I come see it? I'd put her off for 6 months, telling her I wanted to finish. A few more upgrades first. But really, I'd been waiting for the right moment. The moment when it would have maximum impact. And that moment was now. Because I'd been planning something else too. Something bigger than just my own apartment. I'd been working with my landlord and a team of architects to retrofit the entire warehouse building. 20 units, all following variations of my design principles. Affordable micro-apartments that functioned like full-sized homes. We'd just gotten final approval from the city last week. Construction was starting in January. The story wasn't just man lives in small space. The story was engineer designs. Solution to housing crisis proves it works and scales it up. And the Chronicle was breaking that story Monday. The same day, my brother would arrive at work to find his co-workers reading about his failure of a brother on the front page of the newspaper. The same brother he'd been mocking at happy hours. The same brother he'd laughed at tonight. I opened my laptop and pulled up the file I'd been preparing. A comprehensive presentation. About the project, ready to send to Jules after our meeting. Photos, videos, technical specifications, cost analyses, testimonials from housing advocates. Everything she'd need to write the most thorough story possible. My phone rang. Unknown number, but I answered anyway. Riley, this is Harrison Kane. I sat up straighter. Harrison Kane was a venture capitalist who'd made his fortune betting on unconventional solutions to big problems. He'd funded companies that everyone thought were crazy until they changed their industries. Mr. Kane, what can I do for you? I heard through the grapevine that you're meeting with the Chronicle on Monday about your micro-housing project. Word traveled fast in the Bay Area innovation scene. That's right. I'd like to meet with you. Tuesday, if you're available. I've been watching the housing crisis for years, waiting for someone to approach it with real innovation. From what I've heard, you might be that person. I'm definitely available Tuesday. Good. Bring your pitch deck. Bring your numbers. Bring whatever you've got. If you're as smart as people say you are, I might want to write you a check. How? Bigger check? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He laughed. Let's see what you've built first. But Riley? I'm not interested in funding another luxury condo project for tech millionaires. I want to fund something that actually matters. Something that actually helps people. Is that what you've got? Yes, sir. That's exactly what I've got. Then I'll see you Tuesday. He hung up, and I sat there, in my tiny apartment, my brilliant, revolutionary, entirely underestimated tiny apartment, and let myself smile for real this time. Nathan thought I was a failure. Nathan thought I couldn't even afford my rent. Nathan had laughed at me in front of our entire family. But Nathan had no idea what was coming. And when it hit, when he saw the news, when he realized what I'd actually been building, while he'd been mocking me, it would be too late to take back the laughter. Too late to pretend he'd always believed in me. Too late to claim any part of my success. The satisfaction I felt wasn't about proving him wrong, though that would be sweet. It was about proving myself right. about vindicating 3 years of work that everyone had dismissed, about showing that innovation didn't always look like a fancy office in Silicon Valley. Sometimes it looked like a guy in a 280 square foot apartment, working alone, building something that mattered. I looked around my space, at all the clever solutions I'd engineered, at the proof that small could be mighty if you were smart enough and dedicated enough. My brother had laughed at my tiny apartment. Pretty soon, the world was going to be talking about it. And when they were, I'd make sure everyone knew exactly who'd been laughing. And exactly what they'd been laughing at. Revenge wasn't about destruction, it was about vindication. And mine was going to be absolutely perfect. I spent Sunday preparing for the meeting with Jules, going through every detail of my apartment one more time, making sure everything functioned flawlessly. This wasn't just about showing off what I'd built, it was about demonstrating a replicable solution. Every innovation had to be practical, affordable, and scalable. The story needed to be about possibility, not just personal achievement. Around noon, Maya called. "Hey," she said, her voice cautious. "I wanted to check on you after last night." "I'm fine, Maya. Really. Nathan's been texting me. He feels bad about how he acted." That made me pause. "Nathan feels bad? Nathan? Okay, maybe feels bad is generous. He said you were being too sensitive and that he was just joking around, but Mom told him he was too harsh. So he's in that space where he knows he crossed a line, but doesn't want to actually apologize. Sounds about right. He wants me to ask if you're really okay with rent. He said if you're actually going to get evicted, he could maybe help out. But like, in a loan kind of way. With interest." I laughed. A real laugh this time, not the bitter sound that had been trapped in my throat since yesterday. "Tell Nathan I appreciate his incredibly generous offer of a loan with interest, but I've got it handled." "Do you though? Because I can help too. I don't have much, but Maya, you're 23 and working a non-profit job. You need your money more than I need it, but I love you for offering. Then how are you going to pay rent? It's due in a week, right? It's handled. Trust me. That's what you keep saying, but you won't tell me how. Because I want it to be a surprise. Remember what I said? Watch the news Monday evening. Local news? Or check the Chronicle's website. You're being weird. I'm being strategic. There's a difference." She sighed. "Fine. But Riley, whatever you're planning, just be careful. I know Nathan was awful, but he's still our brother. And Mom and Dad, they do care about you, even if they don't always show it the way. They should. I'm not planning anything that'll hurt anyone," I assured her. "I'm just planning to stop being invisible." After we hung up, I thought about what she'd said. Did my parents care about me? Maybe, in their own way. They'd never been cruel, never been actively unsupportive. But they'd never really fought for me either. They'd never pushed back when Nathan mocked me. They'd never questioned his narrative that I was wasting my potential. Passive acceptance felt like a betrayal, all its own. My phone buzzed with an email. "Jules Morrison. Quick question. How much do you pay in rent for your apartment? Want to include that in the article for context." I wrote back, $1,850 a month, including utilities. Yes, I know that sounds high for 280 square feet, but remember this is San Francisco. For comparison, the average studio apartment, around 500 SQFT in my neighborhood, rents for $2,800 to $3,200. Her response was immediate. "Wow. So you're paying significantly less than average for the area, even with the small size. That's an important detail. Also, are you willing to discuss income? We don't need exact figures, but it would help contextualize the affordability angle." I considered. Discussing money felt vulnerable, but it was also crucial to the story. If people thought you needed to be rich to live this way, it defeated the purpose. I've been living on about $40,000 a year while building this, mix of contract work and gig economy jobs. All my remaining income has gone into materials and improvements for the apartment. The key point is that someone making a modest income can afford to live in SF if we rethink how we use space. Perfect. That's exactly the kind of detail that makes this story powerful. See you tomorrow at 10. I spent the rest of Sunday doing something I hadn't let myself do in 3 years. I imagined what success might look like. Not just vindication over Nathan, though I'd be lying if I said that wasn't satisfying too. Think about, but real success. The warehouse project fully funded. My design scaled to other buildings. People across the city having access to affordable housing because of solutions I'd pioneered. Maybe that venture capitalist Harrison Kane really would write me a check. Maybe this thing I'd built in isolation, sustained by stubbornness and spite, could become something bigger. Monday morning arrived with typical Bay Area fog, the kind that made everything feel hushed and pregnant with possibility. I woke up at 6, went through my morning routine, another marvel of efficiency I'd engineered into the space. My bed lifted into the ceiling, revealing floor space. The bathroom's compact shower-laundry combo completed both functions while I made coffee in the kitchen's nested appliances. By 9:45 I was ready. The apartment was in perfect demonstration mode. Living room configuration, everything. Clean and gleaming, documentation materials laid out on the coffee table that would convert to a dining table later if needed. At exactly 10 a.m. my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Jules Morrison standing there with a photographer, a videographer, and a young man she introduced as her assistant, Tyler. "Riley," she said, shaking my hand. Her grip was firm, her eyes bright with journalistic curiosity. "Thank you for finally letting me see this place. I've been dying to since your presentation. Come in. Though I warn you, all 4 of you might make it feel crowded." But as they entered, I watched their expressions shift from skeptical to amazed. The space didn't feel cramped. It felt efficient, intentional, almost spacious despite its actual dimensions. Jules turned in a circle, taking it all in. "This is not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "Honestly, I expected it to feel like a dorm room. But this feels like a real apartment. A really nice apartment." "That's the point," I said. "Most people think small has to mean uncomfortable or incomplete. But that's a failure of design, not a limitation of space." For the next 2 hours, I walked them through everything. The modular wall systems, the transforming furniture, the integrated technology. I demonstrated how the bed lifted into the ceiling, how the desk folded away, how the same 280 square feet could function as bedroom, office, dining room, and living room, without ever feeling cluttered. The photographer went crazy, documenting everything from every angle. The videographer captured me demonstrating various transformations. Jules took pages of notes, asking pointed questions about cost, materials, installation time, and scalability. "The kitchen," she said at one point, running her hand along the counter. "This is maybe 4 feet of space, but you've got full-size appliances, plenty of storage and actual prep area." "How?" "Vertical thinking," I explained. "Most kitchens waste the space above counter height. I used magnetic strips for knives, hanging racks for pots, stacked appliances, and a cutting board that doubles as a sink cover for extra counter space when needed. Every inch has multiple purposes." Tyler, the assistant, was particularly fascinated by the technology integration. "Did you code all this yourself?" "Every line." The automation system alone took 6 months. But it's essential. When you're working with limited space, convenience becomes crucial. I can control everything from my phone or by voice command. Lights, temperature, window shades, appliances, even the bed lift system. "And you built this all yourself? No contractors? All myself?" Partly to save money, partly because I wanted complete control over the design. If something breaks, I know exactly how to fix it because I built it. Jules was shaking, her head in amazement. "Riley, this isn't just a clever use of small space. This is a blueprint for affordable urban housing. Do you realize that? That's what I've been trying to tell people for 3 years. And they didn't listen?" I thought about Nathan's laughter. Not everyone believed it was possible or worth doing. Well, they're going to believe it after this story runs. Speaking of which, you mentioned you're working on a larger project? 20 units? This was the moment. The reveal that would make the story even bigger. Yes. My landlord was so impressed with what I'd done that he decided to retrofit the entire building. We've partnered with a team of architects and engineers who've adapted my designs for varied layouts. Some units will be larger, 400, 500 square feet, for couples or people who need more space. But all of them will use the same principles. Modularity, multifunction furniture, smart. Technology integration. And the rent? We're targeting $1,400, $2,000 per month, depending on unit size, significantly below market rate for the area, while providing quality housing that doesn't feel like a compromise. Jules looked at her assistant. "Tyler, make sure you're getting all these numbers. Already on it. How soon until the units are ready? Construction starts in January. We're hoping to have the first units available by June. We've already got a waiting list of 200 people." The photographer leaned in. "Can I get some shots of you with the space? Maybe demonstrating a few transformations?" For the next hour, they photographed and filmed me showing how the apartment could adapt to different needs. Working at the desk, cooking in the kitchen, sitting on the couch, the bed lowering from the ceiling. Each transformation smooth and effortless, the product of countless hours of engineering and refinement. Finally, Jules checked her watch. I think we've got everything we need. Riley, this is fantastic, better than I imagined. My editor's going to love this. When do you think it'll run? Tonight. Online edition around 6 p.m, print edition tomorrow morning. We're making this a front page feature. It's too good not to. Front page. The words sent a thrill through me. Not because of ego, but because of reach. Front page meant Nathan couldn't miss it. Meant everyone who'd dismissed me would see exactly what I'd built. Meant vindication. After they left, I sat in my apartment, my brilliant, underestimated apartment, and let myself feel the full weight of what was about to happen. By tonight, the story would be public. By tomorrow, Nathan would know. His co-workers would know. Everyone who'd laughed would know. And there was nothing he could do about it. I pulled out my phone and sent a text to Maya. Remember? Watch the Chronicle website at 6 p.m. And Maya? When Nathan sees it, don't let him rewrite history. Don't let him pretend he always believed in me. Her response came quick. What are you talking about? What's happening at 6? You'll see. Love you, sis. Then I sent another text, this one to a group chat with some friends from Berkeley. People who'd supported me through the lean years, who'd believed in the project when no one else did. Chronicle story drops at 6 tonight. Drinks on me tomorrow to celebrate? The responses flooded in immediately. Finally. About damn time. I knew this would happen. So proud of you, man. Does your jerk brother know yet? That last one made me smile. My friends had heard plenty about Nathan over the years. They knew exactly how much satisfaction this moment would bring. I spent the afternoon doing something normal. Grocery shopping, meal prep, a workout in the building's small gym. Anything to keep my mind from obsessing over the clock. But as 6 p.m. approached, I found myself back in my apartment, laptop open, Chronicle, website pulled up, refreshing compulsively. At 5:58 p.m., the page updated. New headline, top of the homepage. Engineer transforms 280 square foot apartment into blueprint for affordable housing, and it's changing how San Francisco thinks about living. Spaces my breath caught. The headline was perfect. It captured both the innovation and the broader implications. Below it was a photo of me in my apartment, the modular walls visible behind me, looking confident and competent, not like a failure struggling to pay rent, like an engineer who'd solved a problem everyone else had ignored. I clicked through to read the article. Jules had done an incredible job. She'd captured every detail, explained the technical innovations in accessible language, contextualized it within the housing crisis, and interviewed housing advocates who praised the approach as exactly the kind of innovative thinking the city needs. And she'd included my costs, the materials, the time investment, the monthly rent compared to market rate. Everything laid out transparently, proving that this wasn't some luxury solution for rich people pretending to slum it. This was real, practical, achievable, affordable housing. Near the end of the article, there was a line that made my heart race. Monroe's brother, a tech executive who asked not to be named, was unavailable for comment about his brother's achievement. However, sources close to the family suggest that Riley has faced skepticism from relatives about his unconventional path. That skepticism is about to be profoundly challenged. I read that paragraph 3 times. Jules had done her homework. She'd clearly talked to someone close to the family. Maya? Maybe. But it was subtle enough not to feel like a hit piece. It just added human context. The brilliant engineer who'd been doubted, now proving everyone wrong. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. My phone started buzzing. Messages flooding in from friends, from former classmates, from people I hadn't heard from in years. Everyone congratulating me, sharing the article, telling me they'd known all along I was onto something. And then, at 6:47 p.m., a text from Nathan. We need to talk. I stared at those 4 words for a long moment. Not congratulations. Not I was wrong about you. Not I'm sorry for laughing. Just we need to talk. The words of someone who'd been caught off guard and was scrambling to regain control of a narrative that had just slipped through his fingers. I didn't respond. Not yet. Let him sit with it. Let him stew in the realization that his failure of a brother had just become front page news while he was still just another VP at another tech company doing work that wouldn't be remembered a year from now. Another text came through, this one from Maya. Riley, oh my God, I'm reading it right now. This is amazing! Then, Mom just called me freaking out. She had no idea you'd done all this. Why didn't you tell us? I typed back. I tried to tell you for 3 years. Nobody wanted to listen. They just wanted to judge. Nathan is losing his mind. He keeps saying the article makes him look bad. The article barely mentions him. If it makes him look bad, that's his own conscience talking. He's calling me. I'm going to let it go to voicemail. Good choice. Enjoy the show. My phone rang. Nathan, of course. I let it ring through to voicemail. He called again immediately. Voicemail again. Then a text. Answer your damn phone. I smiled and set the phone down. This was already more satisfying than I'd imagined. The article was being shared rapidly across social media. Within an hour, it had thousands of shares. Housing advocates were praising it. Architecture blogs were picking it up. Even some tech influencers, the kind Nathan followed religiously, were posting about it, with comments like, "This is what real innovation looks like." And finally, someone using their engineering degree to solve actual problems. At 8:00 p.m., my phone rang again. This time, it was my mother. I considered not answering, but Maya would never forgive me if I completely ghosted the family. I picked up. "Riley," my mother said, her voice strained, "have you seen what's happening online?" "You mean the article about my apartment?" "Yes, I've seen it. I did the interview." "You did? You knew about this? Why didn't you tell us?" "I tried to tell you. For 3 years. You all just assumed I was failing because I wasn't following Nathan's path." "That's not fair. We've always supported you." "Mom, Nathan laughed in my face 2 days ago when I asked for help." "You sat there and said nothing." Dad looked at his phone. "That's not support." She was quiet for a moment. "Nathan is very upset. He says his co-workers are texting him about the article. Some of them are making comments." "What kind of comments? About how he's always talking about his brother being a failure, and now it turns out you're doing something important and he's just working a regular job." The satisfaction I felt was almost painful in its intensity. That must be difficult for him. "Riley, don't be cruel. He's your brother. He was cruel to me first, Mom. For years, and you never once told him to stop. We didn't realize. We thought it was just brotherly. Teasing. It wasn't teasing. It was contempt. There's a difference." I took a breath, trying to keep my voice level. "Look, I'm not trying to hurt Nathan. I'm just trying to live my life and do work that matters. If that makes him uncomfortable, that's something he needs to deal with. He wants to talk to you. He says there are things in that article that aren't accurate. Everything in that article is accurate." Jules Morrison is a respected journalist. She fact-checked everything. But the part about him being skeptical, was he not skeptical? Did he not mock my apartment repeatedly? Did he not laugh at me 2 nights ago when I asked for help? My voice was rising, despite my efforts to stay calm. "Mom, I have documentation of everything I told that journalist. If Nathan wants to claim he was supportive, I can provide evidence to the contrary." "You're being vindictive. I'm being honest." "That's not the same thing. Your father wants to talk to you." There was a shuffling sound, and then my father's voice. "Riley, son, this is getting out of hand. Nathan's very upset. His boss sent him the article. His wife is angry because her friends are asking questions. Can't you just smooth this over?" "Smooth what over, Dad?" "The truth. I built something remarkable. It's getting recognition. That's all that's happening here." "But did you have to mention Nathan in the article?" "I didn't mention Nathan." The journalist talked to someone close to the family who mentioned that I'd faced skepticism. "That's it. The article is about my work, not about him. If he's making it about him, that's his choice. He's saying, 'You did this to embarrass him. I did this to solve a housing crisis.' If Nathan feels embarrassed, maybe he should think about why he feels that way." My father sighed heavily. "I don't understand why you couldn't have just taken one of those job offers. This whole thing could have been avoided." "This whole thing is a good thing, Dad. I created something that matters. I'm getting recognition for important work. This should be a moment our family celebrates, not a crisis Nathan needs to manage. But his reputation is fine. Nobody thinks less of him just because his brother did something noteworthy. Unless he's been telling people I'm a failure, in which case his reputation problems are self-inflicted." Silence on the other end of the line. Apparently, that had hit home. "I need to go," I said. "I have a meeting tomorrow with an investor." "A real investor, Dad. The kind who funds companies that change industries." So while you're all worried about Nathan's feelings, I'm going to be focused on actually building something. I hung up before he could respond. My hands were shaking, not with fear, but with adrenaline. Years of being dismissed, years of being the family disappointment, all coming to a head in one conversation where I finally said what I'd been holding back. It should have felt good, and it did in a way. But it also felt sad. Sad that my family's first response to my success was worry about how it affected Nathan. Sad that even now, even with proof of what I'd accomplished, they couldn't just be happy for me. Another text from Nathan. "You're really going to ignore me? After you threw me under the bus in the newspaper?" I finally responded. "I didn't throw you under the bus. I built something. If you feel bad about how you've treated me, that's not my problem. This is going to damage my career. People are already making comments. Then maybe you should have thought about that before you spent 3 years telling everyone your brother was a loser. I never said you were a loser. I could have let it go. I could have been the bigger person. But I was done being the bigger person. I was done absorbing his contempt and making excuses for it. I pulled up my phone's voice memo app and scrolled back to a recording from 8 months ago. I'd been having coffee with Maya when Nathan called her. She'd put him on speaker, and I'd recorded the conversation without her. Knowing insurance, I'd told myself at the time. Proof, if I ever needed it. I found the relevant section and played it back. Nathan's voice, tinny but clear. Riley's basically living in a closet now, trying to make a business out of being poor. I told the guys at work about it. They got a kick out of it. My brother, the Berkeley grad, living like a college student and calling it entrepreneurship. I sent him the audio file. No comment, no explanation, just the evidence. 3 dots appeared and disappeared several times. Finally, "Where did you get that?" "From one of the many times you've mocked me to family and friends. I've been documenting it, Nathan, all of it. So if you want to pretend you were supportive, I have evidence that proves otherwise. You recorded me without permission? That's probably illegal. California is a 2-party consent state for private conversations. But that was a call where I was present and Maya had it on speaker. Perfectly legal. Want me to send it to Jules Morrison? I'm sure she'd love to hear it for a follow-up piece." The 3 dots appeared and disappeared for a full minute before, "You've changed." "No, I just stopped letting you control the narrative. There's a difference." I set my phone down, refusing to engage further. Outside my window, San Francisco was lighting up for the evening. The fog rolling in from the Bay, the city that had been pricing people out for years now reading about a potential solution to its biggest crisis. And at the center of that solution was me, the brother who supposedly couldn't even afford his rent. My laptop chimed with an email notification. Harrison Kane's assistant, confirming our Tuesday meeting and asking me to prepare a pitch deck. I opened the file I'd been working on for months, the full vision for scaling the micro-housing project. Market analysis, financial projections, site plans for potential locations across the Bay Area. This was what mattered, not Nathan's bruised ego, not my parents' discomfort. Not the family drama that was currently exploding in group texts I'd muted. This work, this solution, this chance to make a real difference. Another email arrived. This one from someone named Dr. Helena Rodriguez. "Mr. Monroe, I'm a professor of architecture at UC Berkeley. I read the Chronicle article about your work. I'd love to have you come speak to my sustainable housing design class. We need more examples of practical innovation like yours." Then another. "Hi Riley, I'm with the Mayor's Office of Housing and Community Development. We'd like to meet with you to discuss how your designs might be incorporated into the city's affordable housing initiatives." And another, "Riley Monroe, I'm a producer for a segment on innovative housing solutions. Would you be interested in being featured in an episode about micro-living?" They kept coming. Messages from journalists, from architects, from city planners, from housing advocates, all wanting to talk, to learn, to potentially collaborate. The thing I'd built in isolation, sustained by stubbornness and spite, was resonating far beyond what I'd imagined. My phone buzzed with a FaceTime call from Maya. I answered, and her face filled the screen, excited and concerned at the same time. "Riley! Oh my God, are you seeing all this? It's everywhere! My friends are sending me the article. My co-workers are talking about it. Someone I went to college with posted it on Instagram saying she knows your sister." "I'm seeing it," I said, unable to suppress my smile. "But also, Mom and Nathan are losing it. The family group chat is blowing up. Nathan's saying you planned this to humiliate him, and Mom's trying to play peacemaker. And Dad's saying You should have warned them and... She stopped, studying my face through the screen. You don't care, do you? About what they're saying. Should I? I mean, they're family. Family that spent 3 years treating me like a punchline. Family that laughed at me 2 nights ago when I asked for help. Family that never once visited my apartment to see what I was actually building. I shook my head. Maya, I love you. You're the only one who ever treated me like my choices deserved respect, even if you didn't fully understand them. But the rest of them? They made their choice about what I was worth. Now they're upset because reality doesn't match their narrative. She bit her lip. Nathan did say some pretty awful things. I didn't realize how bad it was until tonight when I started really thinking about it. All those family dinners where he'd make jokes about your tiny apartment, and everyone would laugh. Yeah, I should have stood up for you more. You stood up for me more than anyone else did. That counts for something. Are you really meeting with an investor tomorrow? Harrison Kane. He called me right after the article was announced. If it goes well, this could become something much bigger than one building. That's amazing. I'm so proud of you. Her eyes were shining. And Riley, I think what you did was brave. Not the apartment stuff, though that's incredible, but the way you stood up to Nathan, even if it's making everything messy right now. Messy isn't always bad. Sometimes you need to make a mess before you can clean things up properly. That's very philosophical for someone who just basically started a family war. I didn't start it. I just stopped pretending it wasn't happening. After we hung up, I sat in my apartment, my tiny, brilliant front-page news apartment, and let myself feel everything I'd been holding back. The anger at years of mockery, the satisfaction of vindication, the excitement of opportunity, the sadness of family relationships that might never recover, the hope that maybe, just maybe, this work could actually change things for people who needed it. My phone buzzed one more time. Nathan, I hope you're happy. You've made me a joke at my own company. I stared at those words for a long moment, then typed my final response to him. I made you nothing. You made yourself. I just stopped protecting you from the consequences. Then I blocked his number. Tomorrow, I had a meeting with Harrison Kane. Thursday, I was speaking to the mayor's office. Next week, I'd be interviewed for that documentary series. My life was about to change in ways I'd dreamed about but never quite believed would happen. And Nathan would have to figure out how to live in a world where his little brother wasn't a punchline anymore, where his mockery had been documented and exposed, where success didn't look like he'd always assumed it would. Some people would call what I'd done revenge, but it wasn't. It was just the truth, finally being told. And if the truth felt like revenge to Nathan, well, maybe that said more about him than it did about me. I pulled out my laptop and started preparing for tomorrow's pitch meeting. The apartment transformation demonstration was ready. The financial projections were solid. The vision for scaling was clear and achievable. My brother had laughed when I couldn't afford rent. Tomorrow, I'd be asking for millions of dollars to revolutionize urban housing. And I couldn't wait to see which version of me history would remember. I woke up Tuesday morning to my phone buzzing with notifications. The Chronicle article had been picked up by national news outlets overnight. CNN, The Washington Post, and every major publication covering housing, urban planning, or innovation was running some version of the story. My tiny apartment had become a phenomenon, but I didn't let myself get distracted by the attention. Today was about the meeting with Harrison Kane, the meeting that could transform this from a personal achievement into an actual movement. I needed to be focused, sharp, ready to present not just what I'd built, but what it could become. I went through my morning routine with extra precision. Shower in the compact bathroom that still functioned better than most full-sized ones I'd used. Coffee from the efficient kitchen setup. My bed lifting smoothly into the ceiling, revealing the clean floor space that always impressed visitors. I dressed carefully. Button-down shirt, good jeans, the kind of outfit that said serious, entrepreneur without trying to mimic Silicon Valley's fake casual uniform. At 9:30 a.m., I left my apartment and headed to Kane Capital's office in the financial district. The building was everything you'd expect from a successful VC firm. Modern glass and steel, lobby with original artwork, security that required sign-in and escort. But when I reached Kane's floor, the aesthetic shifted. The office was more workshop than corporate space, with exposed brick walls, whiteboards, covered in sketches and equations, and what looked like prototypes of various inventions, scattered on shelves. Harrison Kane himself greeted me in the lobby. He was in his early 50s, with silver hair and the kind of casual confidence that comes from having been right about enough risky bets to never second-guess yourself again. "Riley Monroe," he said, shaking my hand firmly. "I've been following the response to your Chronicle article. Seems like you struck a nerve." "Seems like," I agreed. "Good. If you're not making some people uncomfortable, you're probably not doing anything." "Interesting." He gestured toward a conference room. "Come on, I want to see everything." For the next hour, I walked him through the entire project. I showed him the detailed plans of my apartment, the transformation videos, the cost breakdowns. I explained the engineering principles behind each innovation, the modular walls, the multifunction furniture, the integrated automation systems. I showed him the plans for the warehouse building conversion and the financial model we'd developed. Then I showed him the bigger vision. "This isn't just about one building in the Mission District," I said, pulling up a map of San Francisco. "The city has hundreds of underutilized warehouse and industrial buildings, spaces that could be converted using similar principles. We've identified 47 potential sites just in SF proper. And then there's Oakland, San Jose, everywhere in the Bay Area where people are being priced out." Kane leaned forward. "Show me your numbers." I opened my financial projections. Each unit costs approximately $45,000 to retrofit, materials, labor, permitting, everything. We can rent them at $2,400 to $2,000 per month, depending on size and features. That's a 15–20% annual return on investment, while providing housing at 30–40% below market rate. It works as a business and as a solution. What about scale? Can this model work if you're doing 10 buildings instead of one? That's actually where it gets more efficient. Bulk purchasing of materials. Streamlined permitting processes once we have a proven track record. Standardized systems that reduce installation time. I estimate we could bring per unit costs down to $35,000 if we're working at scale. And you want to do this as a for-profit company? Not a non-profit? For-profit with a mission. We need to prove that solving the housing crisis can be economically sustainable. If it only works as charity, it'll never scale enough to matter. But if we can show that doing good and making money aren't mutually exclusive, we can attract the kind of capital that actually changes things. Kane sat back, studying me. "You know what I like about this? It's not another tech company pretending to disrupt something that doesn't need disrupting. You're actually solving a real problem in a way that scales. That's rare. I spent 3 years living in 280 square feet to prove the concept," I said. "I'm not interested in theory. I'm interested in solutions that actually work." "Tell me about your brother." The question caught me off guard. "My brother? The article mentioned you faced skepticism from family. And I've heard through the grapevine that your brother is a VP at TechCore. Word is, he's not thrilled about the publicity." I chose my words carefully. My family didn't understand what I was doing. They saw small space and assumed failure. My brother was particularly vocal about that, but their opinion doesn't change the work. "No, but it tells me something about you. It tells me you're willing to be misunderstood while you build something that matters. That you don't need external validation to keep going." He smiled slightly. "Those are good qualities in an entrepreneur. I learned early that waiting for permission means never starting." "Good, because here's what I'm thinking." He pulled out a tablet and started sketching with a stylus. "I want to fund your warehouse conversion, all 20 units. But I also want to fund a proof of concept for 3 more buildings. Different locations, different layouts, showing that this model adapts to various situations. That's roughly $2.5 million for the current project, plus $4 million for expansion. Call it $6.5 million total." I tried to keep my expression neutral, but my heart was hammering. That was more than I'd hoped for. Significantly more. In exchange, Kane continued, "I want 25% equity in the company you're going to form. You'll maintain majority control, but I'm on the board and I get approval on major strategic decisions. I'm also going to introduce you to some people. City planners, other investors, journalists. This is going to get bigger, Riley, and you're going to need help navigating that. Growth. What's the catch? Smart question. The catch is speed. I want those first 20 units completed in 6 months, not 12. I want the next 3 buildings identified and permitted within 9 months. And I want you to start hiring a team, engineers, project managers, contractors. You can't do this alone anymore. I work better alone. You worked alone to prove the concept. Now you need to scale, and scaling requires delegation. If you can't let go of control enough to build a team, this won't work. He had a certain point. I'd been so focused on doing everything myself, partly from necessity, partly from a need, to prove I could, that I hadn't seriously considered what came next. But he was right. One person couldn't retrofit dozens of buildings. This required infrastructure. Okay, I said, I'll build a team. Good. Then we have a deal. He extended his hand. Welcome to Kane Capital Portfolio Companies. We shook, and I felt the weight of that handshake. This was real now. This was money, expectations, reputation. This was the beginning of something that would either validate everything I'd believed or prove that I'd been delusional after all. One more thing, Kane said as I gathered my materials. That brother of yours, is he going to be a problem? What do you mean? I mean, family drama can sink companies. Lawsuits, public disputes, distraction. If there's going to be fallout from him, I need to know now. I thought about Nathan's texts from last night, his anger, his accusations. But I also thought about the evidence I had, the recordings, the emails, the documentation of years of contempt. He's not going to be a problem, I said firmly. He's angry right now because the story made him uncomfortable. But he's smart enough to know that coming after me publicly would only make things worse for him. His company wouldn't appreciate an executive getting into family feuds in the press. You sure about that? Positive. Nathan's first priority has always been his career. He's not going to risk that over wounded pride. He'll probably just distance himself and pretend we were never close. That bother you? Not even a little bit. Kane smiled. Good. Then let's make this happen. I left Kane Capital feeling like I was walking 6 inches. Off the ground. $6.5 million. Board approval. Industry connections. Everything I'd need to actually scale this dream into reality. My phone had accumulated texts while I'd been in the meeting. Maya, congratulating me on a news segment she'd seen that morning. Former classmates from Berkeley reaching out. Even some messages from people I'd lost touch with years ago. All suddenly very interested in reconnecting now that I was making headlines. And one text from an unknown number. Riley, this is your father. Nathan told us about your meeting today. He said you're getting investor money. We're happy for you. Your mother wants to know if you'd consider having dinner with us this week. She'd like to celebrate your success. I stared at that message for a long time. Now they wanted to celebrate. Now that there was money involved, now that the success was undeniable and public, now they wanted to claim their part in it. Too little, too late. I didn't respond. Instead, I headed to a coffee shop in Soma and opened my laptop. I had work to do, contracts to review, team members to start recruiting, plans to finalize. The meeting with Kane had accelerated everything. 6 months to complete 20 units meant I needed to start now. I drafted a job posting for a project manager, someone with experience in building retrofits and residential construction. Then another for an engineer who specialized in modular systems and space optimization. I'd need at least 5 people to start, maybe 10 as projects ramped up. My phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but I was getting used to unknown calls bringing opportunities. Riley Monroe. Mr. Monroe, this is Stephanie Wu from the Mayor's Office of Housing. We spoke via email yesterday. I'm calling to follow up on a potential meeting. The mayor himself has expressed interest in your work. The mayor of San Francisco wanted to meet with me. I'm available whenever works for his schedule. How about Thursday at 2 p.m.? He has a gap between meetings, and he's very eager to discuss how your designs might be incorporated into the city's affordable housing strategy. Thursday at 2 works. Perfectly. Excellent. I'll send you the details. And Mr. Monroe? The mayor is genuinely excited about this. You've created something the city desperately needs. After we hung up, I let myself sit with that for a moment. 3 days ago, I'd been asking my brother for rent money while he laughed at me. Today, I was meeting with venture capitalists and scheduling appointments with the mayor. The whiplash was almost dizzying. Another call came through. This time, I did recognize the number. Jules Morrison from the Chronicle. Riley, I'm calling because the response to your story has been insane. My editor wants to do a follow-up piece, maybe a full profile. Are you open to that? What kind of profile? The human side of the story. Your journey from Berkeley grad to this moment. The family dynamics. The years of struggle. What drove you to keep going when everyone doubted you? Readers are responding to you as much as to the apartment. I hesitated. A full profile meant digging deeper into my relationship with Nathan, with my parents, with the family that had dismissed me. It meant airing more of that dysfunction publicly. But it also meant controlling the narrative, telling my version before Nathan or anyone else tried to spin it differently. "I'm open to it," I said, "but I want to review quotes before publication. I'm not interested in creating drama for drama's sake. The story should be about the work, not family gossip." "Absolutely. The story is about your work and what drove you to do it. The family stuff is context, not the focus. When can we meet? Let me look at my schedule. Things are moving fast right now. Can I get back to you by end of day?" "Perfect. And Riley? Congratulations. Really, what you've built is remarkable. I spent the rest of the afternoon fielding calls and emails, each one feeling surreal. Architecture firms wanting to consult. Universities wanting me to speak. Housing advocates wanting to collaborate. Even a few tech companies asking if I'd be interested in developing products based on my automation systems. The work I'd done in isolation, the work my family had mocked, was suddenly valuable to everyone. Around 5 p.m., I headed back to my apartment. As I walked through the Mission District, I noticed people looking at me differently. Or maybe I was just imagining it. A couple of teenagers pointed at me and whispered. A woman stopped me on the street. "Excuse me, are you the guy from the newspaper? The one with the tiny apartment?" "That's me. I just wanted to say thank you. My daughter's been looking for housing in the city for months, and she can't afford anything. Reading about what you did gave us hope that maybe things can change. So thank you." She walked away before I could respond, leaving me standing on the sidewalk, processing. This was what it meant for the work to matter. Not the investor money, or the mayor's meeting, or even the vindication over Nathan. It was this. Random people finding hope in what I'd built. When I got back to my apartment building, I found my landlord, Mr. Torres, waiting in the lobby. "Riley," he said, grinning widely. "I've been getting calls all day. Investors wanting to tour the building, city officials asking about our permits, even some tenants asking if they can get on the waiting list for the upgraded units. That's good, right? That's fantastic. But I wanted to talk to you about next steps. With this kind of attention, we need to be strategic. We need lawyers reviewing contracts. We need PR people managing communications. This is bigger than either of us anticipated. I just closed a deal with Harrison Kane. He's funding the full retrofit and expansion." Mr. Torres's eyes widened. "Harrison Kane? The Harrison Kane? Is there another one?" "Riley, do you understand what this means? Kane Capital doesn't invest in small projects. If he's backing you, he thinks this is going to be massive. That's the plan. Then we need to do this, right? I've got some contacts. Lawyers who specialize in real estate development, accountants who work with startups. Let me make some introductions." We spent the next hour discussing logistics, entity structure, contract terms, timeline management. Mr. Torres had experience I didn't, and I was smart enough to recognize that accepting help from people who knew what they were doing wasn't weakness, it was strategy. By the time he left, I had a list of 5 people to contact: a real estate attorney, a corporate lawyer, an accountant specializing in mission-driven businesses, a PR, consultant, and a recruiting firm that could help me find the right team members. The scope of what I was building was expanding by the hour. I was no longer just an engineer who'd optimized his living space. I was becoming the founder of a company that might actually change how cities approached affordable housing. My phone buzzed with another text from that unknown number. My father. "Riley, please respond. Your mother is very upset. She feels like you're shutting the family out of this important time in your life." I finally replied, "I'm not shutting anyone out. I'm just focused on work. If Mom wants to celebrate my success, she can start by acknowledging it was success all along, not just now that there's money and publicity involved." The response came quickly. "That's not fair. We've always supported you." I didn't bother arguing. The evidence spoke for itself. I had 3 years of family dinners where Nathan mocked me, and they said nothing. I had recordings of him disparaging me to others. I had that Thanksgiving dinner where he laughed at my request for help. Their revision of history didn't change what actually happened. Instead of responding to my father, I sent a different text. This one to Maya. "How bad is it over there?" Be honest, pretty bad. Nathan's barely speaking to anyone. Mom keeps crying and saying she doesn't understand what happened to her family. Dad's trying to act like everything's fine. I'm just staying out of it mostly. But Riley, they really are upset. I think they genuinely don't understand why you're so angry. That's the problem. They don't understand because they never wanted to see it. What if they apologize? Would you consider talking to them? I thought about that. Would an apology change anything? Would it undo years of dismissal and mockery? Would it erase Nathan's laughter or my parents' complicity in it? If they apologize, really apologize, not just sorry you're upset, then maybe we can talk. But they have to understand what they're apologizing for. They have to acknowledge that they treated me like a failure for 3 years while I was building something important. Can they do that? I don't know. I can ask. Don't ask on my behalf. If they want to apologize, they need to come to that conclusion themselves. I'm done begging for basic respect from my own family. I set my phone down and looked around my apartment. My tiny, brilliant, life-changing apartment. Tomorrow, I'd start building a team. Thursday, I'd meet with the mayor. Next week, I'd be touring potential building sites with Kane Capital's development team. My life was transforming at a pace I'd never imagined. And somewhere across the bay, my brother was dealing with the fallout of having bet against me for so long. Some people would say I should feel guilty about that family should forgive and forget, that success should be gracious and magnanimous. But those people had never been laughed at by their own brother in front of their entire family. They'd never had to document years of contempt just to prove they weren't making it up. They'd never had to build something world-changing while everyone who was supposed to believe in them actively rooted for them to fail. I wasn't being vindictive. I was just refusing to let them rewrite the story now that the ending had turned out differently than they'd expected. And if that made me the villain in their narrative, I could live with that. Because in the story that actually mattered, the one about solving a housing crisis and giving people hope, I was the hero. And that was the only story I cared about anymore. Wednesday morning brought a development I hadn't anticipated. Nathan showed up at my apartment. I heard the knock and checked my phone's security camera feed, a feature I'd installed as part of the building's automation system. There he was, standing in my hallway, wearing an expensive suit and an expression that was half determination, half discomfort. I considered not answering. I'd blocked his number, made my boundaries clear, moved on with my life. His presence at my door felt like a violation of the space I'd created for myself. But I was also curious. What could he possibly have to say that warranted showing up in person? I opened the door but didn't invite him in. Nathan, we need to talk. So you said in your texts. I didn't realize ignoring those messages meant you'd show up at my apartment. You blocked my number. What was I supposed to do? Take the hint? He flinched at that, and I felt a small, petty satisfaction. Good. Let him feel a fraction of what I'd felt for years. Can I come in? He asked. Why? Because I want to see it. This famous apartment everyone's talking about? You mean the apartment you've been mocking for 3 years? The one you compared to a closet? The one you laughed about with your co-workers? I shook my head. You don't get to see it now that it's famous, Nathan. You had plenty of chances when it was just my home. Riley, please. I drove all the way from Palo Alto. That was your choice. We stood there in an uncomfortable standoff, him in the hallway, me blocking the doorway. Finally, he sighed. I'm sorry, okay? I'm sorry for how I acted on Thanksgiving. I'm sorry for the things I said. I was wrong. What specifically were you wrong about? What? I want to know what specifically you think you were wrong about. Because I'm sorry is easy to say when the person you've been mocking suddenly becomes successful. I want to know if you actually understand what you're apologizing for or if you're just trying to save face. He shifted uncomfortably. I was wrong to laugh at you. Wrong to say you couldn't afford rent. Wrong to make jokes about your apartment and your choices. And what? That's not even close to a complete list. What about the 3 years before Thanksgiving? What about all the family dinners where, retry I continue, you called me a failure? What about telling your co-workers that your brother was living like a broke college student and calling it entrepreneurship? I pulled out my phone and pulled up one of the recordings I'd saved. Want me to play some of your greatest hits? His face went red. You recorded me? I documented your behavior. There's a difference. And before you get self-righteous about it, everything I recorded was from conversations where I was present or was shared with me directly. Nothing illegal, just evidence of what you've been saying about me for years. I can't believe you'd do something so calculating. I learned from the best. You've been calculating about me for years, calculating how to position yourself as the successful brother, how to use me as a cautionary tale, how to elevate yourself by putting me down. I just finally started playing the same game. He stared at me for a long moment, and I could see him processing this new version of me. Not the younger brother who absorbed his contempt in silence, but someone who'd been watching, documenting, planning. "This isn't you," he said finally. "This vindictive, cold person. This isn't who you are. You're right. The old me would have let you walk in here, would have accepted your half-assed apology, would have pretended everything was fine because that's what family does. But the old me also let you treat me like garbage for 3 years. I've evolved. By becoming someone who ruins his brother's reputation? I didn't ruin anything, Nathan. I told the truth about my work. If your reputation suffered because people found out you'd been mocking that work, that's on you. Those were your words, your choices, your actions. You don't get to blame me for the consequences. Do you know what it's been like at work? People won't stop talking about it. My boss pulled me aside yesterday to ask why I'd never mentioned that my brother was doing innovative housing solutions. One of my colleagues actually said, "I thought you said your brother was failing." How do you think that made me look? Probably the way. You've been trying to make me look for 3 years. How does it feel? He took a step back, like I'd physically pushed him. I came here to apologize, to try to fix this, and you're just what? Just refusing to accept that your apology wipes away years of contempt? Yeah, guilty as charged. I leaned against the doorframe. You want to fix this, Nathan? Here's how you fix it. You go back to your co-workers and you tell them the truth. You tell them you were wrong about me, that you let your ego make you blind to what I was actually building, and that you're sorry for misrepresenting me. You do that publicly, and then maybe we can have a real conversation. You want me to humiliate myself? I want you to tell the truth. If the truth is humiliating, maybe think about why that is. This is insane. You're my brother. We're family. That's supposed to mean something. It is supposed to mean something. It's supposed to mean supporting each other, believing in each other, having each other's backs. But you threw all that away the first time you decided I was less valuable than you, because I didn't follow your exact path. So don't come to my door talking about what family means when you've spent years proving. You don't actually understand it. I could see him struggling, his face cycling through. Emotions, anger, hurt, frustration, maybe even a hint of shame. Part of me felt bad for him. He'd come here thinking he could smooth this over, thinking I'd roll over like I always had, thinking an apology would reset everything to the way it was. But I wasn't that person anymore. Success hadn't changed me. It had just given me the leverage to finally stop accepting unacceptable treatment. I can't do what you're asking, he said finally. I can't go to my co-workers and admit I was wrong about you. It'll make me look like an idiot. Then we don't have anything else to talk about. Riley, Nathan, I have meetings today. Important meetings about the work you spent 3 years mocking. I don't have time to make you feel better about the consequences of your own actions. You came here for absolution, but I'm not a priest. I'm just someone who's done being your punching bag. I started to close the door, but he put his hand out to stop it. What about Mom and Dad? They're devastated. Maya says they've been crying, trying to figure out where everything went wrong. Then, they should have thought about that before sitting silent while you tore me apart. They should have thought about it before prioritizing your comfort over my dignity. They should have thought about it before choosing sides instead of being parents to both of us. So that's it? You're just cutting all of us off? I'm not cutting anyone off. I'm just no longer accepting behavior that hurts me just to keep the peace. If they want a relationship with me, they know where to find me. But it's going to be on terms that respect who I am and what I've accomplished, not terms that require me to pretend the past 3 years didn't happen. You've changed, he said, again, but this time it sounded less like an accusation and more like a realization. Yes, I grew a spine. It happens when people don't have a choice. He stood there for another moment and I could see him calculating whether there was any angle, any approach that would get him what he wanted. But I'd learned his tactics over the years. I knew how he operated, and I was done being operated on. I'm closing the door now, I said. If you want to keep standing in the hallway, that's your choice. But I have work to do. I closed the door, locked it, and watched through my security camera as he stood there for nearly a minute before finally walking away. His shoulders were slumped, his confident stride diminished. He looked like someone who'd just realized the game had changed and he didn't know the new rules. Good. My phone rang almost immediately. Maya, did Nathan just come to your apartment? She asked without preamble. How did you know? He called me on his way there. Said he was going to fix things with you. I told him it was a bad idea, but he wouldn't listen. What happened? He showed up, offered a shallow apology, got mad when I didn't, immediately forgive him, and left. Pretty much what you'd expect. He's really upset. He just called me again saying you were cold and vindictive, and that you've changed. I keep hearing that. Apparently standing up for yourself means you've changed. I think what he means is that you're not rolling over anymore. He's used to you being the one who makes peace, who accepts his behavior to keep the family harmony. Now you're not doing that, and he doesn't know how to handle it. That's his problem, not mine. Maya was quiet for a moment. Riley, I get it, I really do. But at some point, don't you think you'll want your family back? Don't you think all this anger will get exhausting? I'm not angry, Maya. I'm clear. There's a difference. I'm clear about what I deserve and what I don't. I'm clear about what behavior I'll accept and what I won't. And if being clear means some relationships have to change or end, then that's what happens, even if those relationships are with family, especially if they're with family, because family should be held to a higher standard, not a lower one. Nathan got away with treating me terribly for years because we're brothers. Mom and Dad enabled it because they didn't want to rock the boat. Everyone got comfortable with a dynamic that was destroying me. And when I finally had the strength to stop it, suddenly, I'm the problem. You're not the problem. I'm not saying that. I worry that you're going to win this battle but lose the war. That you'll be proven right but end up alone. I'd rather be alone and respected than surrounded by people who don't see my value. That's really sad, Riley. What's sad is that I had to build something world-changing before my own family could see me as anything other than a disappointment. What's sad is that success was the only language they understood. What's sad is that all of this, the apartment, the recognition, the investor money, none of it would have been necessary if they'd just believed in me 3 years ago. She sighed. You're right. I know you're right. It just feels like everything's falling apart. No. Things were already apart. They were broken, and we all pretended they weren't. I just stopped pretending. After we hung up, I sat in my apartment and felt the weight of what I'd just said. Was Maya right? Was I going to win this battle but end up isolated, surrounded by success but lacking the relationships that made success meaningful? Maybe. But I'd been isolated for 3 years already. Isolated by family members who dismissed my work, who mocked my choices, who treated my dreams like jokes. At least now, I was isolated on my own terms. A text came through from Mr. Torres. 3 more investors called this morning asking about the building project. Also, a reporter from Architecture Digest wants to do a photo spread. Your apartment is becoming famous, Riley. Hope you're ready for this. I looked around my 280 square feet, the space that had been my laboratory, my proving ground, my sanctuary, the space that Nathan had mocked, and my parents had pitied and strangers on the street, now recognized from newspaper photos. Was I ready for it to become public property? For people to analyze and critique and debate it? For it to stop being just mine and start being everyone's? I didn't have a choice. The momentum was building, and I could either ride it or get crushed by it. But I could set boundaries. I could control access. I could decide who got to enter this space and on what terms. Just like I was doing with my family. Another text. This one from Jules Morrison. Quick question for the profile piece. Do you have any photos of yourself from the past 3 years? I want to show the journey, not just the destination. I scrolled through my phone's camera roll. There were progress photos of the apartment, documentation of each build stage, technical diagrams. But photos of myself? Those were rare. I'd been so focused on the work that I'd barely thought to document the person doing it. Finally, I found a few. One from 2 years ago, taken by a friend at a birthday party. I looked tired, thinner than I was now, but determined. Another from last year, standing in my apartment mid-construction, surrounded by tools and materials. And one from 6 months ago, testing the bedlift system, my face showing focus and satisfaction. In each photo, I looked like someone working towards something. Someone with a vision that nobody else could see yet. Someone who believed in something bigger than himself. That person deserved better than what my family had given him. And the person I was now. The one with investor backing and media attention and real power. To change things, wasn't going to let that past version down by accepting less than he deserved. I sent the photos to Jules with a message. These are what you asked for. The before, during, and almost after of someone building something that mattered while everyone else thought he was wasting his time. Her response came quick. Perfect. These are going to be powerful in the piece. Thank you for trusting me with this story. Trust. That was the word that kept coming up. Nathan wanted me to trust that his apology was genuine. My parents wanted me to trust that they'd always supported me. My family wanted me to trust that their revision of history was the truth. But I'd learned that trust wasn't about faith, it was about evidence. And the evidence of the past 3 years spoke for itself. I pulled out my laptop and opened the document I'd been working on. A comprehensive plan for the next phase of the housing project. With Kane's funding secured, I needed to move fast. Hire a team, identify buildings, navigate city bureaucracy, scale the solution from one building to many. This was the work that mattered. Not family drama, not Nathan's bruised ego, not my parents' belated attempts at reconciliation. This was about creating housing for people who needed it, proving that innovation could solve real problems, changing the narrative about what was possible in expensive cities. My phone rang. Harrison Kane. Riley, quick update. I just got off the phone with the mayor's chief of staff. Seems like your Thursday meeting has gotten bigger. The mayor wants to bring in the planning commission, the housing director, and a few city council members. They want to talk about incorporating your designs into the city's official, affordable housing strategy. My heart rate kicked up. That's bigger than I expected. Get used to it. When you solve a problem everyone's been struggling with, people pay attention. Are you ready for this level of scrutiny? I've been preparing for 3 years. I'm ready. Good, because they're going to ask tough questions. Cost, scale, timelines, permits, regulations. You need to have answers for all of it. I have answers. Then show them what you've got. This is your chance to go from one interesting project to citywide implementation. Don't waste it. After he hung up, I sat with that information. Citywide implementation. My design's becoming official city policy. Thousands of units, not just 20. Real systemic change, not just a feel-good story. This was what I'd been working toward, even if I hadn't quite articulated it to myself. Not just revenge on Nathan, though that was satisfying. Not just proving my family wrong, though that felt good. But actually changing things. Actually mattering. My phone buzzed with another text from that persistent unknown number. My father. Riley, your mother wants to know if you'll come to dinner on Sunday. Just family. No pressure. She wants to talk. I stared at that message for a long time. Part of me wanted to refuse, to maintain the boundaries I'd set, to stay focused on the work. But another part, the part that Maya had touched on, wondered if I was cutting off. Relationships I might regret losing. I typed back, I'll think about it. But if I come, everyone needs to understand that we're talking honestly. No pretending the past 3 years didn't happen. No rewriting history. Real conversation or no conversation at all. The response came quickly. Your mother agrees to that. She wants to understand what went wrong. We all do. Then I'll be there. Sunday at 6? Perfect. Thank you, Riley. I set my phone down, wondering if I'd just made a mistake. But maybe Maya was right. At some point, you had to decide whether being right was more important than having relationships. And maybe, just maybe, my family deserved one more chance to show they could change. After all, I'd changed. I'd gone from someone who accepted mockery and silence to someone who documented it and used it as leverage. I'd gone from someone who asked for help to someone who built his own solutions. I'd gone from someone who needed their approval to someone who'd found it elsewhere. If I could change that much, maybe they could too. But I wasn't holding my breath. And I was definitely bringing documentation to that dinner just in case I needed to prove what had really happened over the past 3 years. Some people would call that paranoid. I called it learning from experience. And if there was one thing the past 3 years had taught me, it was that evidence was everything, especially when people tried to rewrite the story to make themselves look better. Thursday afternoon, I stood outside City Hall, looking up at the building's impressive Beaux-Arts facade. This was where laws were made, where policy was debated, where the future of San Francisco was decided. And in 15 minutes, I'd be walking into a meeting with the people who shaped that future, presenting a solution to a problem that had seemed unsolvable. I'd dressed carefully, professional but not corporate, the kind of outfit that said, I know what I'm doing without trying to look like I belonged in a boardroom. Button-down shirt, blazer, dark jeans. The engineer who cleaned up nice but stayed true to himself. My phone buzzed. Jules Morrison, good luck today. I'm hearing from city sources that they're taking your meeting very seriously. You've got real momentum here. I typed back, thanks, trying not to let the pressure get to me. You'll be fine. You've been preparing for this for 3 years. You know this project better than anyone. She was right. I did know this project. I'd lived it, breathed it, built it with my own hands. But there was still that voice in the back of my head, the one that sounded suspiciously like Nathan, asking who I thought I was, trying to tell the city how to solve its problems. I silenced that voice and walked through the security checkpoint, taking the elevator to the 3rd floor where Stephanie Wu from the mayor's office had told me to meet her. She was waiting in the lobby, a professional woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. Mr. Monroe, thank you for coming. The mayor is very excited about this meeting. She led me down a hallway, lined with historical photos of the city. I should warn you, this group tends to be skeptical of new ideas. They've heard a lot of proposals that sound good but don't work in practice. Be prepared for pushback. I'm used to skepticism, I said. I've been dealing with it for 3 years. She smiled at that. Yes, I read the Chronicle article. Your family sounds complicated. That's a diplomatic way to put it. We reached a conference room where a dozen people were already seated around a large table. The mayor, who I recognized from photos, sat at the head. Next to him were various officials whose titles I'd memorized from the city website. The Director of Housing and Community Development, 3 city council members, the Planning Commission Chair, and several others whose names and roles I tried to keep straight. Mayor Harrison, this is Riley Monroe, Stephanie said. The mayor stood and shook my hand firmly. He was in his mid-50s, with silver hair and the kind of presence that came from years in public service. Mr. Monroe, thank you for taking the time to meet with us. I've been following your work with great interest. What you've built is exactly the kind of innovative thinking we need. Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate the opportunity to present it. We settled into chairs, and I set up my laptop to display my presentation on the room's large screen. I'd prepared extensively for this meeting, anticipating every question, every concern, every objection. This wasn't just about showing them what I'd built. It was about convincing them it could scale. Before we begin, the mayor said, I want to frame this conversation. San Francisco's housing crisis is the defining challenge of our generation. We've tried traditional approaches, zoning changes, developer incentives, affordable housing mandates. Some have helped, but not enough. The median rent in this city is now over $3,000 a month for a 1-bedroom. That's unsustainable. So we're open to new ideas, but we need them to be practical, scalable, and legally sound. With that said, Mr. Monroe, the floor is yours. I took a breath and began. 3 years ago, I moved into a 280-square-foot apartment in the Mission District. Everyone thought I was crazy or broke or both. But I saw it as an opportunity, a laboratory where I could test a hypothesis that the housing crisis isn't just about building more units, it's about using space more efficiently. I clicked to the first slide showing photos of my apartment in various configurations. What I built wasn't just a small apartment. I built a system that allows the same space to function as bedroom, office, dining room, and living room without ever feeling cramped or compromised. I did this through 3 core innovations: modular wall systems, multifunction, furniture, and integrated automation. For the next 20 minutes, I walked them through everything: the technical specifications, the cost breakdowns, the engineering principles. I showed them videos of the transformations, detailed diagrams of the systems, testimonials from housing experts who'd toured the space. Then I moved to the bigger picture. This isn't just about my apartment. With Kane Capital's investment, we're retrofitting 20 units in my building using these principles. But the potential is much larger. I clicked to a map of San Francisco showing dozens of marked locations. We've identified 47 buildings in the city that could be converted using similar approaches. That's potentially 1,000 new housing units at below market rent without requiring new construction or displacing existing residents. A council member raised her hand. Mr. Monroe, this is impressive, but I have concerns about density. 280 square feet is very small. Are we really solving the housing crisis if we're forcing people to live in what amounts to fancy dorm rooms? That's a fair question, Councilwoman Torres. 2 responses. First, these units aren't forcing anyone to do anything. They're options for people who currently have no options. Someone making $40,000 a year can't afford a traditional apartment in San Francisco, but they can afford this. Second, size is relative to functionality. My 280 square feet functions like a 600 square foot apartment because of the design. Residents aren't sacrificing quality of life. They're gaining access to the city that would otherwise be closed to them. But what about families? Another council member asked. This works for single people, but what about couples? Parents with children? That's why we're building varied unit sizes. Some are 280 square feet for individuals, others are 400, 500 square feet for couples. And we're developing larger units, up to 700 square feet, that could work for small families. The principles scale up, not just down. The Planning Commission chair leaned forward. Let's talk about permits and regulations. The building code has minimum size requirements for habitable spaces. How are you navigating that? I'd been expecting this question. We're working within existing code by defining the spaces as efficiency units, which have lower minimums. We're also leveraging recent state legislation around adders and micro units that gives cities more flexibility. Everything we're doing is legal under current regulations, but we're also identifying areas where code updates could facilitate more of this type of housing. So you want us to change the rules for you? I want you to update regulations that were written decades ago and don't account for modern housing realities or innovations. But no, we don't need rule changes to proceed with our current projects. We're just identifying opportunities for future expansion. The Director of Housing spoke up, her voice measured. Mr. Monroe, I've toured projects like this before. Micro-housing, pod living, co-living spaces. They often end up being exploitative, cramming people into tiny spaces and charging premium rent because they add amenities. How is yours different? 2 ways. First, we're charging below market rent. We're not trying to maximize profit. We're trying to maximize access. Second, we're not sacrificing quality. These aren't pods or bunks. They're full apartments with private kitchens, private bathrooms, and space that adapts to residents' needs. The goal isn't to make people tolerate less. It's to make them need less because what they have works better. She nodded thoughtfully. And your funding model? You said Kane Capital is investing. Are they expecting market rate returns? Kane's expecting returns that prove affordable housing can be financially sustainable. Not exploitative returns, but enough to show that doing good doesn't require losing money. If we prove that model works, it attracts more capital. More capital means more units. More units means more people housed. The mayor jumped back in. What do you need from the city to make this happen? This was the moment I'd been preparing for. 3 things. First, streamlined permitting for projects that meet our criteria, retrofitting existing buildings, maintaining affordability commitments using proven designs. Second, partnership on tenant screening and placement. You know who needs housing most. Help us connect with them. Third, recognition that this is a viable approach worthy of public support. If the city endorses this model, more landlords and developers will consider it. You're asking us to officially support private development? I'm asking you to support a solution that works. Whether it's private, public, or some combination, doesn't matter. What matters is getting people housed affordably. If our model proves successful, the city could adopt it for public housing projects. But let us prove it works first. They asked more questions about maintenance costs, about scalability, about potential downsides and unintended consequences. I answered each one, drawing on 3 years of experience actually living in and maintaining this type of space. I wasn't selling them theory. I was selling them proof. Finally, after 90 minutes, the mayor looked around the table. Any other questions? When no one spoke, he turned back to me. Mr. Monroe, this has been enlightening. I think there's real potential here. Stephanie will follow up with you about next steps, but I want to be clear. If you can deliver on what you've presented today, the city is interested in partnering with you. Thank you, Mayor. I won't let you down. As I packed up my materials, various officials came up to shake my hand and exchange cards. The skeptical council member who'd questioned density told me she was impressed by my responses. The Planning Commission chair invited me to present at their next meeting. Even the critical housing director admitted that she'd toured my apartment online and been surprised by how functional it was. Stephanie walked me out. That went extremely well. Better than most presentations we get. You clearly know your stuff. I've been preparing for 3 years. I'd better know it by now. The mayor meant what he said about partnership. This could become a major city initiative if you execute well on those first 20 units. No pressure, I laughed. Right, no pressure at all. As I left City Hall, I felt simultaneously energized and exhausted. The meeting had gone better than I'd hoped, but the weight of expectations was settling on my shoulders. This wasn't just about proving my family wrong anymore. It was about actually delivering on the promise I'd made to people who needed housing, to investors who'd bet on me, to a city that desperately needed solutions. My phone had accumulated messages during the meeting. Several from reporters asking for comment on various aspects of the project. One from Kane Capital's legal team about contract details. And one from Maya. How'd it go with the mayor? I called her back instead of texting. It went well. Really well. They're interested in making this a city-backed initiative. That's amazing. I'm so proud of you, Riley. This is what you've been working toward. Yeah, it's surreal though. 3 days ago, I was a failure who couldn't afford rent. Now I'm meeting with the mayor and planning citywide implementation. You were never a failure. Some people just couldn't see what you were building. She paused. Speaking of people who couldn't see it, Nathan's been calling me. Like, a lot. He wants me to convince you to talk to him. What does he want to talk about? He won't say exactly, just that he needs to explain something. That things aren't what they seem. Very vague and dramatic. Tell him if he has something to say, he can say it at Sunday. Dinner, along with everyone else. You're still coming to that? Yeah, might as well get it over with. Besides, I want to see if they're actually willing to have an honest conversation or if this is just damage control. What if it's damage control? Then I'll know where we stand and I can move on accordingly. After we hung up, I headed to a coffee shop to decompress and catch up on emails. The response to the Chronicle article was still building. I'd received interview requests from 3 different podcasts, an invitation to speak at a TED-style event, and, most surprising, a message from a documentary filmmaker who wanted to follow the housing project over the next year. Riley, I'm Kara Yoshida, director of the housing documentary series Room to Breathe. Your story embodies everything we're trying to explore: innovation, inequality, and individual solutions to systemic problems. Would you be open to being featured in our next episode? I researched her quickly. The series had won awards, been featured on major streaming platforms, and had a reputation for thoughtful, in-depth journalism. This wasn't a puff piece. It was serious documentary work. I wrote back, I'm interested, but I'd want editorial input on how my story is told. This isn't just about me, it's about the work. Can we set up a call to discuss? Her response came within minutes. Absolutely. We work collaboratively with subjects to ensure accuracy and fairness. Let's talk tomorrow. My life was accelerating at a pace I'd never experienced. Every day brought new opportunities, new pressures, new responsibilities. Part of me loved it. This was what I'd been working toward, the validation I'd craved. But another part felt overwhelmed by how quickly Guy with interesting apartment had become Guy who might solve the housing crisis. I opened my laptop and started working on the hiring plan Kane had insisted on. I needed a project manager immediately, someone who could coordinate the warehouse retrofit while I focused on higher-level strategy. I needed engineers who understood modular systems. I needed someone who could handle permits and city bureaucracy. I needed an operations person who could manage day-to-day logistics. Building a team meant trusting other people with the vision I'd been protecting so carefully. It meant delegating, explaining, hoping they understood what I was trying to achieve. It meant letting go of control in ways that made me deeply uncomfortable. But Kane was right. I couldn't scale alone. And if I wanted this to be more than just one successful project, I needed help. I spent the next 2 hours drafting job descriptions, reaching out to recruiters, contacting architects and engineers I'd met through the project. By the time I left the coffee shop, I'd sent out 15 inquiries and had 3 promising responses. As I walked back to my apartment, I noticed something different. People recognized me. A couple walking past did a double take and whispered to each other. A teenager stopped me to ask if I was the guy from the tiny apartment article. A woman thanked me for showing that change is possible. I'd become recognizable. My face had been in enough articles and photos that strangers knew who I was. That was weird and slightly uncomfortable. I'd always been someone who valued anonymity, who worked behind the scenes, who let the work speak for itself. Now I was becoming a public figure whether I wanted to or not. When I got home, I found a package waiting at my door. No return address. But my name and apartment number were written in familiar handwriting. I brought it inside and opened it carefully. Inside was a photo frame containing a picture I hadn't seen in years. Nathan and me as kids, maybe 8 and 6 years old, arms around each other, both smiling genuinely at the camera. We looked happy. We looked like brothers who actually liked each other. There was a note tucked into the frame. Riley, I found this in Mom's house when I was there yesterday. I thought you should have it. Not because I'm trying to manipulate you or make you feel guilty, but because I looked at it and realized how much has changed. How much I've let change. We used to be close. You used to look up to me. I used to be proud of you in a real way, not a competitive way. Somewhere along the line, I let my insecurity turn into cruelty. I let your success feel like my failure. And I convinced myself that putting you down was the same as building myself up. It wasn't, and I'm sorry. Really sorry. Not the sorry you're upset kind of sorry. The sorry I was wrong kind. I know you don't trust this apology. I wouldn't either if I were you. But I wanted you to have this photo anyway. A reminder that we weren't always enemies. That there was a time when I was actually a good brother. I hope Sunday goes better than Wednesday did. But if it doesn't, I'll understand. Nathan, I stared at that photo for a long time. At the two kids who'd had no idea how complicated their relationship would become. At the older brother, who'd once been protective instead of competitive. At the younger brother, who'd once admired instead of defended. That version of us was gone. Years of contempt and dismissal had killed it. But maybe something different could be built in its place. Not the brotherhood we'd had, but something honest. Something real. Or maybe I was being naive. Maybe this was just another manipulation, another attempt to smooth things over without actually changing anything fundamental. Sunday dinner would tell me which it was. I set the photo on my desk, next to my laptop and the plans for the housing project. A reminder of what had been lost? Yes. But also a reminder of what might be possible if people were willing to do the actual work of change. My phone buzzed with a text from Jules Morrison. Profile piece is being edited now. Should run early next week. You're going to like it. It tells the story you deserve to have told. Another piece of the puzzle. Another layer of public narrative being built. Another opportunity for my family to see what I'd actually been doing while they'd been dismissing me. But I was starting to realize that vindication wasn't enough. Public success wasn't enough. Proving them wrong wasn't enough. What I really wanted, what I'd always wanted, was for them to see me. Really see me. Not as the successful engineer or the famous apartment guy or the brother who won. Just as Riley. As someone worthy of respect and support regardless of outcome. And that was something no amount of success could force them to give me. That had to come from them choosing to see differently. Sunday dinner would show me if they could. Sunday arrived with the kind of grey, misty weather that made San Francisco feel introspective. I spent the morning preparing for dinner the way I'd prepare for a negotiation. Gathering my materials, reviewing my evidence, planning my responses to various scenarios. I wasn't going into my parents' house hoping for the best. I was going in prepared for the worst, while remaining open to the possibility of something better. At noon, Maya called. Are you still coming tonight? Unless you're calling to tell me not to. No, I'm calling to give you a heads up. Mom's been cooking all day. Like, stress cooking. There's enough food for 20 people. Dad's been pacing. Nathan showed up an hour ago and he's been in the den with Dad, talking about something. I don't know what's happening, but everyone's on edge. How do you feel about all this? Honestly, I'm nervous. I want this to go well. But I also know that 3 years of dysfunction doesn't get fixed over one dinner. And I'm worried that someone's going to say the wrong thing and it'll blow up again. If it blows up, it blows up. At least then we'll know where everyone actually stands instead of pretending. That's very zen of you. That's very tired of me. I'm exhausted from pretending, Maya. If tonight goes badly, at least it'll be honestly badly. She laughed at that, though it sounded strained. I'll see you at 6. And Riley, thank you for giving them this chance. I know it's not easy. After we hung up, I looked at the materials I'd assembled. The recordings, the emails, the documentation of 3 years of contempt. I'd brought them to Wednesday's confrontation with Nathan, ready to prove my case if he tried to rewrite history. But looking at them now, they felt heavy. Like weapons I didn't actually want to use. Maybe I didn't need to prove anything. Maybe the truth was self-evident to anyone willing to see it. And if my family couldn't see it without me forcing evidence down their throats, then no amount of proof would change their minds. I left the documentation at home. If I needed it, it would still be there. But tonight, I was going to try something radical. Honesty without armor. Vulnerability without proof. Giving them the chance to do better without holding the threat of consequences over their heads. Either they'd rise to the occasion or they wouldn't. But at least I'd know. I arrived at my parents' house at 5:55 p.m. The familiar suburban street looked the same as always. Well-maintained lawns, expensive, cars in driveways. The kind of neighborhood where success was measured in square footage. And property values. 3 years ago, I'd felt like a failure pulling up to this street in my aging Honda. Now I felt like someone who'd learned that their measures of success were too narrow to capture anything real. Maya met me at the door before I could knock. Everyone's in the living room. Mom made Dad promise not to try to control the conversation. Nathan's been weirdly quiet. I think they're all scared of what you're going to say. Good. They should be. Riley, I'm not going to attack anyone, Maya, but I'm also not going to pretend everything's fine. That's the deal, remember? Honest conversation or no conversation. She nodded and led me inside. The house smelled like my mother's cooking. Roast chicken, garlic mashed potatoes, the comfort foods she made when she wanted to nurture people, or when she felt guilty and didn't know how else to express it. My parents were sitting on the couch, close together in a way that suggested they were presenting a united front. Nathan sat in the armchair, his posture tense, his expression guarded. Everyone looked up when I entered, and the room filled with the kind of awkward silence that comes when people have rehearsed what they want to say but don't know how to start saying it. Riley, my mother said, standing up. She moved like she wanted to hug me, then thought better of it and settled for a week. Smile. Thank you for coming. Please, sit down. I took the chair opposite Nathan, positioning myself where I could see everyone. Maya perched on the arm of the couch next to our mother, her role as Switzerland clearly established. Before anyone says anything, my father began, I want to set some ground rules. We're here to have a real conversation, not to fight. Everyone gets to speak without being interrupted. And we're going to be honest, even if that honesty is uncomfortable. Can we all agree to that? I nodded. Nathan did too, though he looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Good, my father continued. He looked older than he had at Thanksgiving. Stress and sleepless nights had carved new lines in his face. Riley, your mother and I have spent the past week doing a lot of thinking. About you. About our family, about the past 3 years. We've talked to Nathan extensively. We've read everything we could find about your project. And we've come to realize that we've failed you in significant ways. My mother started, crying before he'd even finished the sentence. We're so sorry, sweetheart. We didn't see what you were building. We didn't understand what you were trying to do. We let Nathan's narrative become our narrative, and we never questioned it. Why didn't you question it? I asked quietly. For 3 years, you watched him mock me. You sat through family dinners where he called me a failure. You never once asked me what I was actually doing or why it mattered to me. Why? My father looked down at his hands, because it was easier to believe Nathan was right than to confront the possibility that we'd been wrong. Nathan was successful in ways we understood. Corporate job, nice house, traditional path. You were different, and we didn't know how to support different. So you chose not to support me at all. We thought we were being neutral, my mother said. We thought staying out of it meant we weren't taking sides. But we see now that silence was taking a side. It was taking Nathan's side. Nathan shifted in his chair. They're not wrong. I made it easy for them to doubt you. I talked about your apartment like it was evidence of failure instead of evidence of innovation. I framed every conversation about you in terms of what you weren't doing instead of what you were doing. I poisoned the well, and they drank from it. Why? I looked at him directly. Why did you need to tear me down? What did you get from it? He was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working like he was chewing on words he didn't want to swallow. Because you scared me, he finally said. You've always scared me since we were kids. You were smarter than me, more creative, more willing to take risks. I got good grades because I worked hard, but you got good grades because learning was easy for you. I had to follow the rules to succeed, but you could break them and still come out ahead. That's not true. I struggled. Not the way I struggled. Everything I have, I earned through grinding it out, playing the game, doing what was expected. But you got into Berkeley on scholarships. You got job offers from companies that rejected me. You could have had everything I worked my whole life for and you just walked away from it. Do you know how infuriating that was? Watching you reject the things I'd killed myself to achieve? So you decided to make me pay for that? I decided to convince myself, and everyone else, that you'd made a mistake. That walking away from those opportunities was proof you didn't have what it takes. Because if you could be successful doing things your way, it meant I'd wasted my life doing things the right way. The honesty in his voice was startling. This wasn't the rehearsed apology from Wednesday. This was real admission, real vulnerability. He looked miserable saying it, but he was saying it anyway. And when you found out I actually was successful doing things my way, I prompted. I panicked, because it meant everything I'd told myself about you was wrong. It meant I'd been cruel for no reason except my own insecurity. It meant I'd damaged our relationship, maybe permanently, over my own fear of being inadequate. He looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. I'm so sorry, Riley. I'm sorry for every joke, every dismissal, every time I made you feel small so I could feel big. You deserved better from me. You deserved a brother who celebrated your choices instead of mocking them. I sat with that for a moment, feeling the weight of it. This wasn't the Nathan I'd grown up with, the confident older brother who always knew better. This was someone who'd been stripped down to his foundations and found them shaky. What changed? I asked. Why are you saying this now? Because you got caught? Because your reputation took a hit? Because I looked at that photo I sent you, the one of us as kids, and I realized I don't want to be the person I've become. I don't want to be someone whose first response to his brother's success is resentment. I don't want to be someone who needs other people to fail so he can feel successful. He leaned forward. I'm in therapy now. Started on Thursday. My wife insisted after she read the Chronicle article and asked me why I'd been lying to her about you for years. You lied to Courtney about me? I told her you were a trust. Fun kid squandering your opportunities. That you were brilliant, but lazy. That you could have been something, but chose to be nothing. She had no idea you were actually building something revolutionary because I couldn't stand for her to know the truth, that my younger brother was doing something more important than I'd ever done. My mother was crying harder now. We enabled all of this. We let him talk about you that way and never corrected him. We accepted his narrative because it was easier than admitting we didn't understand what you were doing. You could have asked me, I said, my voice harder than I intended. At any point in the past 3 years, you could have come to my apartment, looked at what I was building, and asked me to explain it. But you never did. You just assumed I was struggling because that's what Nathan told you. You're right, my father said. We made assumptions based on incomplete information. We trusted Nathan's interpretation instead of seeking our own understanding. That was lazy parenting and unfair to you. It was more than unfair. It was abandonment. When I asked Nathan for help with rent on Thanksgiving, I wasn't actually asking for money. I was testing him. I wanted to see if he'd help, or if he'd do exactly what he did, laugh at me and mock me in front of everyone. And when he laughed, when you all sat there and said nothing, it confirmed what I'd suspected for years, that I was on my own, that my family would rather believe I was failing than support me in succeeding. Differently. The room was silent except for my mother's crying. Maya had tears running down her face too, but she stayed quiet, letting me say what needed to be said. Do you know what that's like? I continued. To work yourself to exhaustion, building something you believe in, and have your own family treat it like a joke? To achieve something remarkable and have the people who are supposed to be proudest of you act like it's an embarrassment? I spent 3 years feeling like I was crazy for believing in this project because the people who were supposed to know me best kept telling me I was wasting my time. We were wrong, my mother said through her tears. We were so wrong, and I don't know how to make it right. You make it right by actually seeing me, I said. Not the version of me you wish I was. Not the version Nathan told you about. The actual me. Someone who values impact over income, who measures success differently than you do, who's willing to live in 280 square feet because it means proving something important. Can you do that? Yes, my father said firmly. We can do that. We will do that. Even if I never get a traditional job, even if I never move to the suburbs or buy a house like Nathan's, even if I keep choosing to do things differently. Even then, my mother said, we should have supported your choices all along, not just now that they've been validated by the world. That's what parents are supposed to do. Believe in their children even when they don't. Understand the path they're taking. I looked at Nathan. And you? Can you handle having a brother who's getting recognition for work you don't understand? Can you stop competing with me long enough to actually have a relationship? I'm trying, he said. I know that's not enough, and I know it doesn't undo the damage I've done. But I'm trying. My therapist says I've based too much of my self-worth on being the successful brother. And when you became successful in your own way, it threatened my identity. I need to build a sense of self that isn't dependent on being better than you. That sounds like therapy speak. It is. But it's also true. I don't know if I can fix this, Riley. I don't know if we can get back what we had as kids, but I'd like to try to build something new. Something honest, even if it's not easy. I stood up and walked to the window looking out at the perfectly manicured lawn, the expensive cars, the neighborhood that represented everything I'd rejected. Part of me wanted to accept their apologies, to forgive and move forward to reclaim the family relationships I'd lost. But another part, the part that had been documenting and preparing and protecting myself for 3 years, wondered if this was real or just another performance. I need you to understand something, I said, turning back to face them. I can't go back to the way things were before. I can't go back to being the brother who absorbs Nathan's contempt and silence. I can't go back to being the son who settles for crumbs of approval. If we're going to rebuild these relationships, they have to be built on mutual respect. That means you don't get to dismiss my choices just because they're different from yours. It means you support me even when you don't understand what I'm doing. It means you believe in me first and ask questions later. We can do that, my mother said. Can you? Because it's easy to say it now when I'm getting national media attention and investor funding. But what about when the next project fails? What about when I try something new and it doesn't work? Will you still believe in me then? Or will you go back to seeing me as the son who made bad choices? My father stood up and crossed the room to stand in front of me. Riley, I can't promise we'll never make mistakes again. I can't promise we'll always understand your choices, but I can promise that we'll try. And when we fail, because we will fail sometimes, I promise we'll be open to hearing about it and doing better next time. That's all we can offer. Is it enough? I looked into his eyes and saw something I hadn't seen in years. Genuine uncertainty. He wasn't sure if his answer was enough. He was genuinely asking, genuinely hoping I'd give him another chance. It's a start, I said finally. But you need to understand. Trust has to be rebuilt, not just declared. You're going to have to show me consistently, over time, that you actually see me differently. Words are easy. Behavior is what matters. We understand, my mother said, joining us. And we'll show you. Starting now. Tell us about your meeting with the mayor. Tell us about the housing project. Tell us what you're building and why it matters. We want to understand. So I did. For the next hour, I walked them through everything. The engineering principles, the design philosophy, the bigger vision for solving the housing crisis. I showed them photos and videos on my phone. I explained the meeting with Harrison Kane, the conversation with the mayor, the documentary that wanted to follow my work. And they listened. Really listened. Asked questions that showed they were trying to understand, not just waiting to interject their own opinions. My mother took notes on her phone. My father asked about technical details. Even Nathan engaged, asking about the business model and how I planned to scale. It felt surreal, sitting in their living room, finally having the conversation I'd wanted for 3 years. The conversation where my family actually saw what I'd been building and recognized its value. Why didn't you tell us about any of this? My mother asked. Why did you let us think you were struggling? I tried to tell you. Remember when I invited you all to see my apartment last year? Nathan said he was too busy. You said it was too far to drive for just a visit. Dad said you'd come sometime. I invited you to the housing conference where I presented. None of you came. I sent you articles about micro-housing innovation. You never commented on them. I tried, for 3 years, to share what I was doing. You just weren't interested in seeing it. They couldn't argue with that. The evidence was there in our text histories, our emails, our declined invitations. We failed you, my father said simply. We were so focused on what we thought success should look like that we couldn't see the success you were actually building. That's on us, not on you. Maya finally spoke up. I think we should eat. Mom's been cooking all day and the food's getting cold. Maybe we can continue this conversation over dinner. We moved to the dining room and my Mother served the meal she'd been preparing. Comfort food meant to soothe, to nurture, to apologize in the language she knew best. As we ate, the conversation shifted from heavy confession to lighter topics. Maya talked about her job. Nathan mentioned that Courtney wanted to tour my apartment, if I'd allow it. My parents asked about my plans for hiring a team. It felt almost normal, not the forced normalcy of previous family dinners where we all pretended dysfunction didn't exist, but the careful normalcy of people trying to find their way back to each other. After dinner, Nathan pulled me aside while Maya and our parents were clearing dishes. "Can we talk? Just for a minute?" I followed him to the backyard, the same yard where we'd played as kids, where we'd had countless water balloon fights and soccer games and moments of actual brotherhood. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness," he said, staring at the darkening sky. "And I'm not asking for it. But I need you to know that seeing your success didn't just make me feel guilty. It made me reassess my entire life. I'm 34 years old, making good money, living in a nice house, and I'm miserable. Because I've spent my whole life chasing other people's definitions of success and never stopped to ask what success means to me. What does it mean to you? I don't know yet. That's what I'm trying to figure out. But I know it's not what I've been doing. I know that tearing you down didn't make me bigger. It just made me smaller." He turned to face me. "I want to be someone you can be proud to call brother. I don't know if that's possible anymore, but I want to try." "It's possible," I said. "But Nathan, it's going to take time. You spent 3 years damaging this relationship. It's going to take longer than 3 weeks to repair it, I know, and I'm prepared for that. I'm prepared to show up, consistently, and prove that I've changed, even if it takes years. Why? What changed between Wednesday, when you showed up at my apartment expecting me to roll over, and now?" He smiled ruefully. "Courtney. She read me the riot act. Told me that if I didn't fix this, she'd leave me. Said she didn't marry someone who tears down his own family, and if that's who I'd become, she didn't want to be married to that person anymore. It was a wake-up call. So you're doing this to save your marriage?" "I'm doing this because she made me realize I'd become someone I don't want to be. Someone who needs his brother to fail so he can feel successful. Someone who can't celebrate other people's achievements without making it about himself. I don't want to be that person, Riley. Not anymore." We stood in silence for a moment, and I thought about the photo he'd sent. Me, the 2 kids who'd had no idea how complicated their relationship would become. Those kids were gone. But maybe different versions of us could exist. Versions that were honest about our failings and committed to doing better. "I'm willing to try," I said finally. "But on my terms. We rebuild this slowly, with clear boundaries and honest communication. And if you slip back into old patterns, I walk away. No more chances after this. Deal." He extended his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, I shook it. "One more thing," I said. "That recording I sent you, of you mocking me to Maya. I have more of those. A lot more. Documentation of 3 years of your contempt. I brought them to Wednesday's confrontation, but I didn't use them. And I won't use them as long as you're actually trying to change. But if you go back to mocking me, if you try to rewrite history again, I'll release everything. Understand?" He paled slightly. "You've been documenting everything? I learned from you. You taught me that evidence matters, that people will deny their own behavior unless you have proof. So yes, I documented everything. Insurance policy, that's fair. And honestly, it's probably what I deserve." He looked at me with something that might have been respect. "You're a lot tougher than I gave you credit for. I had to be. You made sure of that." We went back inside where my mother was serving dessert. Apple pie, my favorite. The conversation continued around the table, lighter now that the heavy work of confession and apology had been done. Plans were made for my parents to visit my apartment next week. Nathan mentioned wanting to volunteer for the housing project, maybe helping with business planning or fundraising. Maya suggested a family dinner the following month, where we could celebrate properly instead of in crisis mode. It felt like the beginning of something. Not the restoration of what we'd been, but the construction of something new. Something built on honesty instead of pretense. Something that acknowledged damage instead of ignoring it. As I was leaving, my mother pulled me aside. "Riley, I want you to know, we're proud of you. Not just because you're successful, but because you had the courage to build something that mattered even when everyone doubted you. That takes real strength." "Thank you, Mom. That means a lot. And I'm sorry it took so long for me to say it. I'm sorry we made you feel like you had to prove yourself before we'd believe in you. That's not how family should work." I hugged her, and she held on tight like she was afraid I'd slip away if she let go. "We're going to do better," she whispered. "I promise you, we're going to do better." Driving home, I felt a strange mixture of emotions. Relief that the confrontation was over. Hope that maybe my family could actually change. Skepticism that therapy and good intentions would be enough to undo years of damage. And underneath it all, a deep sadness for the time we'd lost, for the brotherhood that had been poisoned, for the years I'd spent believing I was the problem instead of recognizing that the problem was how they saw me. But there was also something else. Closure. The conversation I'd been needing for 3 years had finally happened. The truth had been spoken, the apologies had been offered, and while I wasn't naive enough to think everything was fixed, I was hopeful enough to think maybe it could be. My phone buzzed with a text from Maya. "Thank you for giving them a chance. Tonight was hard but necessary. I love you." I texted back, "Love you too. Thanks for being the only one who consistently saw me." Another text, this one from Nathan. "I meant what I said. Every word. Thank you for not giving up on me completely." I didn't respond to that one. Words were easy. Behavior was what would matter. Time would tell if Nathan's apology was genuine or just another performance. But for tonight, it was enough that we'd all finally been honest with each other, finally admitted the truth, instead of hiding behind comfortable lies. Revenge, I was learning, wasn't always about destruction. Sometimes it was about forcing people to see clearly, to see what they'd done, what they'd missed, what they'd nearly lost. The article, the publicity, the success, all of it had been necessary to break through years of willful blindness. But what came after revenge was more important. What came after was the choice to rebuild or to walk away, to accept changed behavior or to protect yourself from repeated harm. I wasn't sure yet which choice I'd make with my family, but at least now I had the option. At least now they understood what they'd almost lost forever. And that understanding, that moment of clarity where they finally saw me, might be the best revenge of all. The following week brought a whirlwind of activity. On Monday, I hired my first team member, a project manager named Kenji who had 15 years of experience in residential retrofitting and a passion for affordable housing. He was in his 40s, had worked on social housing projects in Tokyo before moving to San Francisco, and understood immediately what I was trying to accomplish. "You're not just building apartments," he said during his interview. "You're building a proof of concept that could change how cities think about housing. That's the kind of project I want to be part of." By Wednesday, I'd hired 3 more people: an engineer named Priya who specialized in modular systems, a permit specialist named Marcus who knew how to navigate city bureaucracy, and an operations coordinator named Taylor who'd worked in property management. The team was small but mighty, each person bringing expertise I didn't have, filling gaps in my knowledge. The Tuesday meeting with Harrison Kane had turned into a weekly check-in. He wanted updates on team building, progress on the warehouse retrofit, and plans for the next 3 buildings we'd identified. He also introduced me to more investors, more architects, more people who could help scale the vision. "You're becoming the face of affordable housing innovation in San Francisco," Kane told me during our second meeting. "That's a lot of responsibility. Are you ready for it?" "I don't have a choice. The work needs to be done whether I'm ready or not. That's the right answer." He pulled up a spreadsheet. "I'm connecting you with 2 more buildings, one in Oakland, one in San Jose. Both have owners interested in retrofitting. If you can replicate your success across different locations, we prove this model works everywhere." The documentary filmmaker Kara Yoshida started filming that week. She and her crew showed up at my apartment on Thursday morning, cameras ready to capture my daily routine, my work process, my vision for the project. It was invasive at first, having strangers document my private space. But Kara had a way of making it feel collaborative rather than exploitative. "I'm not here to sensationalize your story," she explained. "I'm here to show people that solutions to big problems often start with one person, willing to try something different. Your apartment isn't just a clever use of space. It's a statement about values, about what matters, about choosing impact over image." She interviewed me for hours, asking about my motivation, my process, my relationship with my family. I was honest about Nathan's mockery, about feeling dismissed, about using that dismissal as fuel to prove something. But I also talked about the bigger why: the housing crisis, the people being priced out, the need for innovation in a sector that hadn't changed in decades. "Do you feel vindicated?" she asked at one point. "Now that everyone can see what you've built?" Vindication was never the goal. Solution was the goal. The vindication is just a side effect. But it must feel good, having your family realize they were wrong about you. It feels complicated. Part of me enjoys the vindication, I won't lie about that, but part of me is just sad that it took public recognition for them to see value in what I was doing. Real support shouldn't be conditional on success. That clip, when it aired months later, would become one of the most shared moments from the documentary. People responded to the honesty, to the acknowledgement that revenge could feel simultaneously satisfying and hollow. Jules Morrison's profile piece ran on Wednesday morning. She'd titled it "The Engineer Who Lived Small to Think Big." How Riley Monroe's tiny apartment became a blueprint for change. The article traced my journey from Berkeley, graduate to misunderstood innovator to celebrated solution maker. She interviewed people I'd worked with, housing advocates who praised my approach, even some former classmates who remembered me talking about housing innovation in college. And she included a section about my family, carefully worded but clear in its implications. Monroe's path wasn't without opposition. His older brother, a successful tech executive, initially dismissed the project as impractical. Family dinners became battlegrounds over different definitions of success. But Monroe persisted, documenting his progress even when those closest to him suggested he was wasting his potential. "I learned that sometimes you have to believe in yourself first," Monroe says, "because approval from others might never come, or might come too late to matter." The article went viral. Within hours, it was being shared across social media, featured on news aggregator sites, discussed on podcasts. The narrative had shifted from interesting housing project to man proves doubters, wrong through innovative solution. People loved the underdog story, the family drama, the vindication arc. My phone became unusable from the volume of messages, interview requests, speaking invitations, collaboration proposals. People sharing their own stories of family members who doubted them. I had to hire Taylor, my operations coordinator, to manage communications because I couldn't keep up. On Thursday afternoon, my parents came to visit my apartment for the first time. They'd asked to come earlier in the week, but I'd insisted on Thursday, giving them time to read Jules's article, to process what I'd actually been doing for 3 years, to prepare themselves for what they'd see. My mother cried when she walked in. Not sad tears, but overwhelmed tears. "Riley, this is incredible. I had no idea. I thought you were living in a tiny space because you couldn't afford better. I didn't realize you'd built this. I demonstrated the transformations. Bed lifting into the ceiling, walls reconfiguring, furniture adapting." My father, the former engineer, was fascinated by the technical aspects. He asked detailed questions about load bearing, about automation systems, about the cost of materials. "This is master's level engineering," he said, running his hand along one of the modular wall panels. "You built all this yourself? Every piece." Taught myself what I didn't already know. Spent 3 years refining, testing, improving. And we never came to see it. My mother sat on the couch, looking around with wonder and regret. "You invited us, multiple times, and we never came. You didn't think it was worth seeing. We didn't think it would be this. We thought—" She stopped, seemingly unable to articulate what they'd thought. "You thought I was living in poverty and calling it entrepreneurship." I finished for her. "Because that's what Nathan told you. And you never questioned it." "We're questioning everything now," my father said. "Nathan's in therapy. Your mother and I are in couples counseling. We're trying to understand how we got so far off track." "Did you get off track? Or were you always on this track and I just finally stopped accepting it?" They didn't have an answer for that. Before they left, my mother pulled me aside. "There's something I need to tell you. Something that might help you understand why we've been the way we've been." "Okay. When I was pregnant with you, the doctors said there were complications. They weren't sure you'd survive. And then when you were born healthy and brilliant, we felt so grateful. But we also felt this need to protect you, to make sure nothing went wrong. With Nathan, we pushed him because we knew he could handle it. But with you, we held back. We didn't want to push too hard and break you. So you decided not to support me at all? We decided to let you find your own path. But somewhere along the way, that became not supporting any path that looked risky. We were so afraid of you failing that we couldn't see you succeeding. Does that make sense? It makes sense as an explanation. It doesn't make it right. I know. But I wanted you to understand it came from fear, not from lack of love. We love you desperately. We just showed it in the worst possible way. After they left, I sat in my apartment and processed that information. My mother's explanation didn't excuse 3 years of dismissal, but it did provide context. They'd been protecting me from a threat that didn't exist, and in doing so, had failed to protect me from the real threat, feeling unsupported and alone. That evening, Nathan called. Courtney and I would like to tour your apartment this weekend, if that's okay. She saw the photos from the article and she's fascinated. Sure. Saturday afternoon? Perfect. And Riley, I'm starting to understand what you built. Not just the physical space, but the philosophy behind it. It's making me rethink a lot of things like what? Like the fact that I'm paying $8,000 a month for a house I barely use. I have 4 bedrooms and only need 1. I have a 3-car garage for 2 cars. I have space I'm maintaining, just because that's what success is supposed to look like. But seeing what you've done with less space, it's making me question whether bigger is actually better, or if it's just more expensive. This was new. Nathan not defending his choices, but questioning them. What does Courtney think about that? She's questioning things too. She saw the article about you and said, your brother is doing something that matters. What are we doing? Making mortgage payments on space we don't need? It's been an uncomfortable week for both of us. Good. Discomfort means growth. He laughed, but it sounded strained. You've really changed the game, Riley. I'm still processing what that means for me. Friday brought the mayor's office back into my life. They wanted to schedule a follow-up meeting to discuss integrating my designs into the city's official affordable housing plan. But more than that, they wanted to feature the project at an upcoming town hall about housing solutions. The mayor wants you to present to the community, Stephanie Wu explained over the phone. Show them what's possible, answer their questions, help them understand that microhousing doesn't mean sacrificing quality of life. When? 2 weeks from tomorrow. Town hall starts at 7 p.m., but we'd want you there by 6 for setup and prep. I'll be there. The project was taking on a life of its own. What had started as a personal challenge, prove I could live well in small space, had become a citywide conversation about housing policy. What had started as spite toward my dismissive family had become something bigger than my need for vindication. And somewhere in that transformation, my anger had shifted. It was still there. 3 years of hurt didn't evaporate just because my family apologized. But it was no longer the driving retry or continue force. The work itself had become the motivation. The people who'd been priced out of the city, the families living in cars, the teachers and nurses who couldn't afford to live in the communities they served. They were why I kept going now, not just to prove Nathan wrong. That realization hit me Saturday morning as I prepared for Nathan and Courtney's visit. I cleaned the apartment. Not that it needed much cleaning, given how organized the space forced me to be, and thought about how much had changed in 2 weeks. 2 weeks ago, I'd been standing in my parents' living room being laughed at. Now I was preparing to present to the city, managing a team, scaling a solution. The revenge I'd planned had worked. Better than I'd imagined. Nathan had been publicly embarrassed. My family had been forced to confront their dismissiveness. I'd been vindicated in the most satisfying way possible, not through cruelty, but through success so undeniable they couldn't ignore it. But the revenge had also transformed into something else. Into purpose. Into responsibility. Into a chance to actually change things instead of just proving a point. Nathan and Courtney arrived at 2 p.m. I'd met Courtney at family functions before, but we'd never had substantial conversations. She was beautiful in that cultivated way that wealthy suburbs produced. Perfect hair, designer clothes, the kind of polish that came from having money and time to maintain it. But today, she looked different. Less polished, more genuine. Like she'd stopped performing for a moment. Riley, she said, hugging me unexpectedly. Thank you for letting us come. I've been dying to see this place since I read the article. I gave them the full tour, demonstrating each transformation, explaining the engineering behind each innovation. Nathan watched quietly, his expression unreadable. But Courtney was fascinated, asking questions about functionality, about how I'd solved various problems, about whether the designs could work in larger spaces. You could do this in a normal-sized house, she said at one point. Imagine if we had furniture that transformed like this in our 4 bedrooms. We could use the space so much more efficiently. That's the idea, I said. This isn't just about making small spaces work. It's about rethinking how we use space in general. Most homes waste at least 30% of their square footage on space that's rarely used. Nathan finally spoke. I've been thinking about that. About our house. We have a formal dining room we use maybe 6 times a year. A guest bedroom that sits empty except when Courtney's parents visit. An office I never work in because I'd rather work from the living room. We're paying for all this space we don't actually need. So why do you pay for it? I asked. Because that's what success looks like. That's what you're supposed to want. The big house, the extra space, the physical manifestation of having made it. But seeing what you've done here, I'm starting to realize that might be the wrong measure. Courtney sat on my transforming couch, looking around. Can I be honest about something? Please. When Nathan first started talking about you, 3 years ago, I believed him. I believed you were wasting your potential, making bad choices, living small because you'd failed at living big. I'm ashamed of that now, but I believed it because it fit a narrative I understood. That success means upward, mobility, bigger spaces, more stuff. Your brother challenged that narrative, and I wasn't comfortable with that challenge. Why not? Because if living in 280 square feet could be a choice rather than a compromise, it meant all our expensive space might be unnecessary. It meant we might be slaves to possessions and square footage rather than masters of our own lives. It was easier to believe you'd failed than to question whether we'd succeeded at the wrong things. That's remarkably honest, I said. I've been doing a lot of thinking since the article came out. About what we value and why. About what kind of life we're actually building. And I realized we're building the life we think we're supposed to want, not the life we actually want. There's a difference. Nathan looked at her with something like surprise. You've never said that before? I've never let myself think it before. But watching Riley build something that actually matters while we just accumulate expensive things that don't make us happy, it's been a wake-up call. They stayed for 2 hours, and the conversation shifted from the apartment to bigger questions about values, about what constituted a good life, about the difference between success and fulfillment. It was the most honest conversation I'd ever had with Nathan. Not competitive, not defensive, just real. As they were leaving, Nathan pulled me aside. I know we have a long way to go. But today, this felt like brothers talking instead of enemies performing. Thank you for that. Thank you for being willing to question yourself. That's harder than people think. Everything hard is worth doing, he said. You taught me that. After they left, I sat in my apartment and felt something I hadn't felt about my family in years. Hope. Real hope. Not the naive kind that ignored evidence, but the earned kind that came from watching people actually try to change. The documentary crew returned Monday to film me working with my new team. They captured Kenji and me touring the warehouse building, marking measurements, discussing timelines. They filmed Priya sketching modular wall designs. They interviewed Marcus about navigating city permits. They documented Taylor fielding the endless stream of inquiries that kept coming. You're building something bigger than you, Kara observed between takes. Does that scare you? Terrifies me, I admitted. 6 months ago, this was just my apartment. Now it's becoming a movement. I'm not sure I'm equipped to handle that. No one's equipped to handle it until they do it. That's how movements work. Someone starts something, others join in, and suddenly you're all doing something none of you could have done alone. She was right. The project had grown beyond what I could have built alone. I had a team now. I had investors and city support and media attention. I had people believing in the vision, not because I'd convinced them, but because they saw the need for it themselves. Wednesday brought another development. I received a call from a university in Los Angeles. They wanted to create a research program around micro-housing design, and they wanted me to consult on developing the curriculum. We're seeing what you've built, the program director explained, and we want to train the next generation of architects and engineers to think the way you think, about efficiency, about innovation, about using space intelligently. Would you be interested in contributing to that? I was interested, more than interested. The idea of my work influencing how future designers thought about housing felt like scaling the impact in ways I'd never imagined. Yes, I said. Definitely yes. That evening, I met with Maya for dinner. She'd been my constant supporter throughout everything, and I felt like I'd been so focused on the work and the family drama that I'd neglected that relationship. "I'm proud of you," she said over Thai food at a restaurant near my apartment. "Not just for what you've built, but for how you've handled all of this. You could have been cruel to Nathan. You could have cut the family off completely. But you gave them a chance to be better. I gave them a chance because you asked me to," I said. That dinner was hard, Maya. Having to sit there and hear their apologies, having to decide whether to believe them. Do you believe them? I believe they want to change. Whether they can actually do it, that's still an open question. But they're trying. That has to count for something. Nathan's really different. Have you noticed? He's less performative, more honest. I think the therapy is helping. Or he's just scared of losing his wife and his family. Fear can look like growth. You're very cynical for someone whose tiny apartment is changing the world. I laughed. 3 years of being dismissed will do that to you. But you're right. I need to give them credit for trying. It's just hard to trust it after so long. Trust takes time. But Riley, they're putting in the time. They're showing up. That's more than they've done in years. She was right. My parents had visited twice more since that first tour. Nathan had called to ask about the project without making it competitive. My mother had sent me articles about housing innovation. She thought I'd find interesting. Small gestures, but consistent ones. The kind of behavior that suggested real change rather than performative apology. The town hall meeting arrived faster than I'd expected. 2 weeks felt like 2 days with everything else happening. I prepared extensively. Presentation slides, statistics, videos of the apartment transformations, testimonials from housing advocates. I wanted to be ready for every question, every concern, every objection. The community center was packed when I arrived. Hundreds of people crammed into a space designed for maybe 200. The mayor was there, along with city council members, housing advocates, journalists, and citizens who were desperate for solutions to the crisis that was pricing them out of their own city. Stephanie Wu found me backstage. "You ready for this? It's going to be intense. People have strong feelings about housing. I've been preparing for 3 years. I'm ready. Good. Because this is your moment. You're about to show an entire city what's possible." The mayor introduced me with praise that felt surreal. Riley Monroe represents the kind of innovative thinking we need. While others have complained about the housing crisis, he's been building solutions. I'm proud to present him tonight as we discuss the future of affordable housing in San Francisco. I walked onto the stage to applause, looking out at hundreds of faces. Some hopeful, some skeptical, some desperate for anything that might help. I took a breath and began. 3 years ago, I moved into a 280 square foot apartment. People thought I was crazy. My own family thought I was failing. But I saw that tiny space as an opportunity, a chance to prove that the housing crisis isn't unsolvable. It just requires thinking differently. For the next 30 minutes, I presented everything. The apartment, the innovations, the warehouse project, the bigger vision for citywide implementation. I showed them the numbers. How much it cost, how much rent would be, how many people it could house. I addressed concerns about density, about quality of life, about whether this was truly a solution or just a band-aid. "This isn't about forcing people to live in tiny spaces," I said. "It's about giving people options they don't currently have. Someone making $45,000 a year can't afford to live in San Francisco right now. But with housing like this, they can. That's not a compromise. That's an opportunity." The Q&A session was intense. People asked tough questions. Won't this just let landlords charge more for less space? Not if we build enough of it. Supply and demand. Right now, there's no supply of affordable micro-housing. We're creating that supply. What about families? Single people might be fine in small spaces, but what about people with kids? We're building multiple unit sizes, including larger ones that work for families. This isn't one size fits all. It's a range of options adapted to different needs. How do we know this won't become another way to exploit poor people? By building it with the right values from the start. We're committing to below-market rent. We're committed to quality design. And we're involving the community in every step to make sure this serves people's needs, rather than investor profits. One woman stood up, her voice shaking. "I'm a teacher. I've taught in San Francisco schools for 12 years. Last month, I got evicted because my landlord sold the building. I've been living in my car for 3 weeks while I try to find something I can afford. Can you actually help people like me? Or is this just another thing that sounds good but doesn't work?" The room went silent. This was the moment that mattered. Not the statistics or the innovations, but whether this actually helped real people. Yes, I said. This is designed exactly for people like you. The units in our first building will be available in 6 months. We're prioritizing teachers, nurses, first responders, people who serve this community but can't afford to live in it. I can't promise you'll get one of the first 20 units, but I can promise we're building more. And I can connect you with resources right now to help you find temporary housing. That's not enough, but it's something. After the event, she found me. I gave her the contact information for housing advocates I knew, for temporary assistance, programs, for everything I could think of that might help. It wasn't enough. Nothing felt like enough when faced with someone sleeping in their car after dedicating their life to teaching kids. But it was something. Maya had come to the town hall, along with my parents. They found me after, while I was still talking to people with questions. That was incredible, my mother said. Riley, you were made for this. The way you answered questions, the way you connected with people. You're not just an engineer anymore. You're a leader. I'm just someone who built something that works. No, my father said. You're someone who saw a problem everyone else had given up on and refused to accept, that it was unsolvable. That's leadership. Nathan had come too, I realized. He'd been standing at the back of the room during my presentation. He approached now, his expression serious. I need to tell you something, he said. Watching you up there, seeing what you've built, I realized I've spent my entire adult life being jealous of you for the wrong reasons. I was jealous of your intelligence, your creativity, your courage to do things differently. But what I should have been jealous of is this: your ability to care about something bigger than yourself. Your willingness to use your gifts to actually help people instead of just making money. You can still do that, I said. It's not too late to pivot toward work that matters. I'm starting to figure that out. Courtney and I have been talking about it, about what we want our lives to actually be about. Your success isn't making me feel like a failure anymore. It's making me want to redefine what success means to me. That's good, Nathan. Really good? He smiled, and for the first time in years, it was a genuine smile without any competitiveness or resentment behind it. We're going to be okay, aren't we? Eventually? Eventually, I agreed. If we both keep trying. The local news covered the town hall extensively. Clips of my presentation went viral on social media. Housing advocates praised the approach. Some critics argued it wasn't enough, that we needed systemic change, not individual solutions. They weren't wrong. We did need systemic change. But we also needed solutions that worked right now for people who were suffering right now. By the end of November, 6 weeks after that Thanksgiving dinner where Nathan had laughed at me, everything had changed. The warehouse retrofit was ahead of schedule. 3 more buildings had been identified and were in various stages of permitting. My team had grown to 12 people. The documentary was in post-production. Universities were reaching out about partnerships. Other cities were asking how to replicate the model. And my family, complicated, flawed, trying, was actually showing up. My parents visited weekly. Nathan and I had coffee every Tuesday, slowly rebuilding something that resembled brotherhood. Maya remained my closest ally, the person who'd believed in me when no one else would. But the most significant moment came in December, when the first 20 units in the warehouse building were completed and ready for occupancy. We held an open house, showing them to the people who'd won the lottery to secure one of the coveted spots. Watching their faces as they toured the apartments, as they saw that small could be functional, that affordable didn't have to mean ugly, that they finally had a place they could afford in the city they loved, that was everything. One woman cried as she walked through her new apartment. I've been working 3 jobs trying to afford rent. This is going to give me my life back. I can work 1 job now. I can actually sleep. That moment, that gratitude, that relief, was worth more than any vindication over Nathan. It was worth more than the investor money or the media attention or the recognition, because it proved that the work mattered, that 3 years in my tiny apartment hadn't been about proving a point. It had been about solving a problem, though I'd be lying if I said the proving Nathan wrong part hadn't been satisfying. Christmas arrived, and with it came an invitation from my mother. Real family Christmas this year. No drama, just celebration. Please come. I almost said no. The memory of last year's Thanksgiving, standing in that living room, being laughed at, feeling invisible, was still fresh enough to sting. But Maya convinced me. It's different now, she said. They're different. "You're different. Give it a chance." So I went, bringing with me a carefully wrapped gift for each family. Remember, not expensive, but thoughtful. For my mother, a book about innovative architecture she'd mentioned wanting to read. For my father, a custom 3D printed model of one of the modular wall systems. For Nathan, a framed photo of us as kids. The same one he'd sent me, but now with an inscription on the back. "To new beginnings and honest brotherhoods." The house looked different this time. Maybe because I was different, or maybe because my parents had actually changed things. The photos on the mantel had been rearranged. Now there were equal numbers of me and Nathan and several new ones of Maya. The formal dining room my parents rarely used was set up with warmth instead of showiness. Nathan and Courtney arrived at the same time I did. Courtney hugged me immediately. "I have news," she said, her eyes bright. "We listed our house. We're selling it and moving to something smaller. A townhouse in the city, actually. Close to Nathan's work, close to your project area. We realized we don't want to spend our lives maintaining space we don't need." "That's a big change," I said. "It is. But it's the right one. You inspired it. Watching you choose intentionally instead of just accepting what you're supposed to want." Nathan looked nervous, like he was waiting to see how I'd react to his presence, but I just nodded at him. "Merry Christmas." "Merry Christmas, Riley. Thanks for coming." Maya bounded down the stairs, wearing a ridiculous Christmas sweater with actual working LED lights. "The family's all here? No fighting allowed today. I made everyone sign a peace treaty." "You did not?" my mother said, laughing. "I did. It's on the fridge. Signed by everyone. No passive-aggressive comments, no bringing up past hurts, just being present. We're doing Christmas right this year." Dinner was different from every other family dinner I could remember. The conversation was real. Not performative, not competitive, just actual family talking. My parents asked about the housing project with genuine interest. Nathan talked about his therapy insights without defensiveness. Courtney shared her excitement about downsizing. Maya entertained us with stories from her non-profit work. And no one made fun of my choices. No one dismissed my work. No one compared my path to Nathan's and found mine lacking. It felt like family was supposed to feel. After dinner, my father stood up to make a toast. "I want to say something. This time last year, our family was fractured. We were performing family instead of being family. We'd let old patterns and poor communication damage relationships that should have been strong. And it took Riley forcing us to see clearly. Through his success, yes, but more, importantly through his honesty, to realize how far we'd strayed. He looked at me. "Riley, you've given us a gift this year. Not just the innovation you've built or the recognition you've earned. You've given us the gift of truth. You refused to let us keep pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. You demanded better from us, and in doing so, you've made us better. So thank you. I didn't do it to make you better," I said honestly. "I did it to protect myself. I know. But the result was the same. You held up a mirror and forced us to see ourselves clearly. That's a gift, even if it didn't feel like one at the time." Nathan raised his glass. "To Riley, who proved that success doesn't have to look the way everyone expects it to. Who showed us that courage means doing what matters even when everyone tells you you're wrong. And who had enough love for this family to give us a chance to do better, even after we'd spent years not deserving it." Everyone drank to that, and I felt my throat tighten. With emotion. This was what I'd wanted all along. Not revenge, but recognition. Not vindication, but visibility. Not to prove them wrong, but to have them finally see me right. Later, Maya and I escaped to the backyard while everyone else was cleaning up. The December air was cold, our breath visible in the darkness. "You did it," she said. "You actually changed things." "What do you mean? The family." "You broke the pattern. Nathan's actually working on himself instead of just competing with everyone. Mom and Dad are questioning their assumptions. Even Courtney's different. She's thinking about what kind of life she actually wants, instead of just accepting what she's supposed to want. You started a chain reaction. I just refused to keep accepting unacceptable behavior. That's exactly my point. Someone had to be brave enough to say, this isn't okay, and stick to it. Someone had to be willing to burn bridges if necessary. You were that person. And because you were, the rest of us can be different too. Are you different?" She thought about that. "I'm braver. Watching you stand up to Nathan, to Mom and Dad, to everyone who doubted you, it's making me braver about my own life. I've been thinking about going back to school, getting my master's in social work. Before, I wouldn't have done it because it would mean more student loans, more uncertainty. But you've shown me that choosing the path that matters is worth the risk. You should do it. You'd be an incredible social worker. Thanks to you, I might actually believe that enough to try. We stood in comfortable silence for a moment, and I thought about everything that had changed in 2 months. I'd gone from being the family disappointment to being someone they actually respected. From living in an apartment they mocked to building a housing solution they celebrated. From absorbing contempt in silence to demanding better and getting it. But more than that, I'd transformed my anger into something productive. The spite that had fueled my early work had evolved into genuine purpose. The need for revenge had matured into commitment to creating real change. That was the unexpected gift of the whole experience. Learning that the best revenge wasn't hurting the people who'd hurt you. It was becoming so focused on work that mattered that their opinions became irrelevant. It was building something so significant that their mockery turned into admiration, not because you'd forced them to change, but because the evidence of your success left them no choice. Nathan found us in the backyard. Can I join you, or is this a Riley-Meyer bonding moment? You can join, I said. He stood on my other side, the three of us looking up at the clear December sky. I've been thinking about something, he said. About that Thanksgiving dinner last year. About how I laughed at you when you asked for help. Nathan, we don't need to... No, let me say this. I replay that moment in my head constantly. It was the worst thing I've ever done to you, and I've done a lot of bad things. But that moment, laughing at you when you were vulnerable, that's the one I can't forgive myself for. You need to forgive yourself eventually. Holding on to guilt doesn't help anyone. How can you be so understanding about this? I was terrible to you, because holding on to anger would poison me, not you. Because grudges are heavy, and I don't want to carry them. Because you're actually trying to change, and that deserves acknowledgement. I looked at him. But Nathan, understand something. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. I've forgiven you because holding on to resentment was exhausting. But I also won't forget how you treated me. That memory protects me from accepting that treatment again. That's fair. More than fair. He was quiet for a moment. I'm proud of you. I don't know if I've ever said that out loud, but I am. You've built something I could never have built because I'm too conventional, too risk-averse, too focused on what people think. You're braver than I'll ever be. You're braver than you think. It takes courage to admit you were wrong. It takes courage to change patterns that have defined you for decades. You're doing that work only because you forced me to. If you just accepted my behavior, I'd still be the same person. Then maybe you should thank me for being difficult. He laughed at that. Thank you for being difficult. Thank you for refusing to let me get away with being cruel. Thank you for holding up a mirror even when I didn't want to look. Maya linked arms with both of us. Look at us. The Monroe siblings finally acting like we actually like each other. Do we like each other? Nathan asked. I considered, I like who you're becoming. The jury's still out on who you were. I can work with that. We went back inside where my parents had set up a fire in the fireplace and brought out dessert. The evening continued with the kind of easy warmth I'd never experienced at family gatherings before. No tension, no performance. Just people who were related to each other, trying to actually be family instead of just play family. Before I left that night, my mother pulled me aside. I wanted to give you something. She handed me a small wrapped box. Inside was a watch, not expensive or flashy, just a simple, well-made timepiece. It was your grandfather's, she explained. He wore it every day of his life. When he passed, he left it specifically for you. But I held on to it because I didn't think you'd appreciate it. I thought you were too focused on rejecting material things to value a family heirloom. Mom, let me finish. I was wrong. You don't reject material things. You just choose them carefully. You value quality over quantity, function over flash. Your grandfather was the same way. He would have loved what you've built. He would have understood immediately why it matters. She closed my fingers around the watch. This belongs to you. It always did. I'm sorry I held on to it for the wrong reasons. I looked at the watch. Worn leather band. Scratched face. The patina of decades of daily wear. It was perfect. Not because it was expensive, but because it represented being seen correctly. Being understood. Thank you, I said. Really? No, thank you. For not giving up on us? For giving us the chance to do better. for showing us what actually matters. Driving home that night, wearing my grandfather's watch, I felt a sense of completion I hadn't known I'd been seeking. The revenge I'd planned, making my family witness my success, forcing them to acknowledge they'd been wrong about me, had worked. But it had also transformed into something more valuable: actual relationship repair, honest connection, the possibility of real family instead of performance family. My phone buzzed with a text from Jules Morrison. Just got word. Your Chronicle profile won a State Journalism Award. Category: Feature Writing, Social Impact. Thought you'd want to know. Another text from Harrison Kane. Board meeting tomorrow, 10 a.m. We're discussing expansion to LA and Seattle. Hope you're ready to go national. And one from Kenji, my project manager. First tenants move into the warehouse units next week. 20 families getting keys to their new homes. We did it, boss. 20 families. 20 people who'd been struggling to afford housing in their own city. 20 lives changed because I'd been stubborn enough to believe that 280 square feet could become something revolutionary. That was the real victory. Not Nathan's public embarrassment or my family's forced recognition or the investor money or the media attention. The real victory was those 20 families getting keys. The real victory was proving that solutions existed if someone was brave enough to build them. My tiny apartment, the one Nathan had laughed at, the one my parents had pitied, the one strangers now toured like a museum exhibit, had become exactly what I dreamed it could be: proof that innovation could solve problems everyone else had given up on. And the best part? I was just getting started. 6 months later, I stood in my tiny apartment. Though it wasn't quite as tiny anymore. I'd taken the unit next door when it became available, combining the two 280 square foot spaces into a more spacious 560 square feet. I'd applied all the same principles, but now I had room for a small home office, a slightly larger living area, and actual storage space for all the materials and documents the project had generated. Selling out? Maya had teased when I told her about the expansion. Evolving, I'd corrected. The project's grown beyond what one person in 280 square feet can manage. I need space for a team to meet, for materials to be stored, for life to happen. That doesn't invalidate what I built originally. It just acknowledges that needs change. The documentary had aired in March to significant acclaim. Room to Breathe. The Riley Monroe story became one of the most watched episodes in the series' history. Watching it had been surreal. Seeing my 3-year journey compressed into 50 minutes. Seeing myself at various stages of building. Seeing interviews with my family where they admitted their mistakes. The most powerful moment had been toward the end, when they'd interviewed one of the first tenants. A single mother who'd been working as a nurse while living in her car with her 2 kids. She'd gotten one of the warehouse units and the documentary showed her moving in. Her children running through the space, exploring every corner. Her tears of relief and gratitude. I thought I'd have to leave San Francisco, she'd said to the camera. I love this city. I've worked here for 8 years, but I couldn't afford it anymore. This apartment, what Riley built, it's giving me my city back. It's letting me stay. That clip had been shared millions of times. It had sparked conversations about housing policy across the country. It had made the project about more than just clever design. It made it about human, dignity, about the right to live in your community, about solutions that actually worked. The expansion had happened faster than anyone expected. We now had projects in 5 Bay Area cities, with plans to expand to Los Angeles, Seattle, and Portland by year's end. The team had grown to 35 people. We'd formed partnerships with nonprofits, with city governments, with other architects, and engineers who wanted to apply similar principles to their own work. And the money, the thing that had supposedly been my weakness, the inability to afford. Rent that Nathan had mocked was no longer an issue. Between Kane Capital's continued investment, additional funding from impact investors, and a profitable business model that proved affordable housing could be financially sustainable, I was doing well. Not Nathan's kind of well, not luxury car and vacation home well, but comfortable, secure, able to focus on the work without financial stress. Nathan and I had settled into something that resembled brotherhood. We had coffee every Tuesday, sometimes talking about work, sometimes about family, sometimes about the philosophies we were each developing about what made life meaningful. He'd left his VP position to start a consulting firm focused on helping tech companies develop more ethical business practices. The pay was lower, the prestige less, but he seemed happier. I'm trying to figure out what you figured out 3 years ago, he'd told me recently. That work can be about more than making money. That success can be measured in impact instead of income. It's harder than I thought, redefining yourself at 34. Try redefining yourself. At 32, while everyone's telling you you're failing? Fair point. But Riley, seriously, thank you for showing me there was another way. I don't know if I ever would have questioned my path if you hadn't blazed your own. My parents had become genuine supporters, not just people trying to make amends. They'd volunteered at several of our housing fairs, helping potential tenants understand the application process. My mother had even started a blog about downsizing and intentional living, inspired by what I'd built. My father had joined our advisory board, bringing his engineering expertise to bear on technical challenges. The transformation wasn't complete. Families didn't heal in 6 months, but it was real. The change was consistent enough that I could trust it, believe in it, build on it. On this particular day in late June, I was preparing for a significant moment. The 1-year anniversary of the Chronicle article that had started everything. Jules Morrison had asked to do a follow-up piece, and I'd agreed. But this time, I'd asked if she'd be willing to include my whole family, to show not just what I'd built, but how the family dynamics had evolved. They all agreed to participate. Nathan and Courtney now living in a tastefully downsized townhouse in the Mission. My parents, who'd started hosting regular family dinners where actual conversation happened. Maya, who was 3 months into her social work master's program and loving it. Jules arrived with the same photographer from the original article, ready to capture what had changed in a year. We gathered in my expanded apartment, which felt spacious now compared to the original. 280 square feet, but still embodied all the same principles. So, Jules began, her recorder running. A year ago, your story was about a man proving everyone wrong. What's the story now? I thought about that. Now it's about a family learning to see each other clearly. It's about revenge transforming into purpose. It's about building something that matters more than being right. She turned to Nathan. You were prominently featured in the last article as someone who doubted Riley. How do you feel about that now? Nathan didn't flinch. I feel like that article told the truth, and the truth was uncomfortable. I had doubted Riley. I had mocked his choices. I had been dismissive and cruel. Seeing that in print, having my co-workers and friends read about it, that was painful. But it was also necessary. I needed to face what I'd done. And what have you done about it? Therapy. Honest conversations. Actually trying to change. And most importantly, actually listening to Riley instead of assuming I know what's best for him. It's been humbling. Do you think Riley's success changed you? Or would you have changed? Anyway, his success forced me to change. Without that mirror being held up, I could have kept telling myself I was fine, that my behavior was just brotherly teasing, that Riley was too sensitive. But when the whole world could see what I'd been doing, I couldn't lie to myself anymore. Jules turned to my parents. You've both said you feel like you failed Riley during his early years building this project. What's different now? My mother answered. Now we ask instead of assuming. Now we visit instead of staying away. Now we believe in him first and question later. And not just with Riley, with all our children. We've learned that support doesn't mean understanding everything someone does. It means trusting that they know what they need better than you do. Retry or continue. What about the claim that you only started supporting Riley once he became successful? Jules pressed. My father took that one. That claim is accurate, and it's shameful. We should have supported him when he was struggling in obscurity, not just when he was celebrated in the newspaper. But we can't change the past. We can only commit to doing better going forward. And we are. Riley knows he can call us at any time, for any reason, and we'll be there. Not because he's successful, but because he's our son. Jules turned to Maya. You were the one family member who consistently supported Riley. How do you feel watching your family change? Maya smiled. Vindicated, honestly. I spent years trying to get them to see what I saw, that Riley was doing something important. Now they finally do, but I'm also happy, because Riley doesn't just have my support anymore. He has all of us, and he deserves that. The interview continued for 2 hours, covering the business, growth, the expansion plans, the impact on actual people's lives. But Jules kept circling back to the family dynamics, clearly understanding that was the real story, not the apartment or the innovation, but the relationships that had been damaged and were slowly being repaired. One final question, she said to me. If you could go back to that Thanksgiving dinner when Nathan laughed at you, knowing everything you know now, would you change anything? I thought carefully before answering. I'd change the hurt it caused me in that moment. I'd change the years of dismissal that led up to it. But the actual moment? No. Because that moment, painful as it was, became the catalyst for everything that followed. It gave me the final push I needed to stop seeking their approval and start demanding their respect. It turned my anger into fuel. And ultimately, it led to this. Actual family connection instead of performed family. Connection, so you're grateful for the betrayal? I'm grateful for what I built in. Response to it. The betrayal was painful, but it clarified things. It showed me who was really on my side and who was just performing care. And that clarity, while painful, was valuable. After Jules and the photographer left, my family stayed. We ordered pizza. No fancy catering, just actual food that actual people ate. We sat in my living room, which could now comfortably fit all of us, and talked about nothing important, just life, just being together without agenda or performance. Nathan showed me photos of their new townhouse, 3 bedrooms instead of 4, 1 car, garage instead of 3, but thoughtfully designed with principles he'd learned from my work. Courtney's happier, he said. We both are. Turns out, maintaining a mansion you don't need is exhausting. My mother talked about her blog, which had unexpectedly gained a following. People want permission to want less, she explained. They're tired of keeping up with everyone else. Your story gave them that permission. My father discussed the advisory board work, some technical challenges we were facing with permits in LA. Have you considered partnering with... He started, then caught himself. Sorry, I'm offering unsolicited advice. Old habit. No, keep going. I want your advice. I hired you for a reason. He smiled at that. Okay. Have you considered partnering with the university architecture departments? They could provide student interns, research support, fresh perspectives. That's actually brilliant. Why didn't I think of that? Because you're trying to do too much yourself. Let other people help. Let the next generation contribute. That's how movements sustain themselves. It was good advice. And the fact that he'd offered it as a suggestion instead of a directive showed how much he'd changed. Or maybe how much I'd changed. Now I could hear advice without feeling like I was being controlled. As evening turned to night and my family finally left, Maya lingered behind. You okay? She asked. Today was intense. Today was good. Really good. A year ago, I couldn't have imagined us all in a room together without tension. Now it feels almost normal. You did that. You demanded better, and you got it. We all did it. You supported me. They did the work to change. I opened the door to reconciliation. It was a team effort. Very diplomatic of you. She hugged me. I'm proud of you, big brother. Not just for the work, but for the person you've become through it all. You could have let the hurt make you bitter. Instead, you let it make you better. After she left, I stood in my apartment alone, looking around at the space that had started everything. The modular walls I'd built by hand. The furniture that transformed with a touch. The systems I'd designed and coded. This wasn't just an apartment. It was proof of concept. Proof that one person with an idea and the stubbornness to pursue it could actually change things. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Mr. Monroe, this is Kyla Rodriguez. You helped me last year when I was living in my car. I got one of your apartments in the second building. I just wanted to say thank you. My kids have a home now. A real home. You gave us that. I stared at that message for a long time, feeling the weight of it. This was why the work mattered. Not the revenge on Nathan, not the vindication, not the investor money or the media attention. This, knowing that a family had a home because of something I'd built. I typed back, thank you for sharing that. Knowing it's making a real difference in people's lives is why we keep building. Another text came through, this one from Harrison Kane. Board meeting next week is going to be big. We have interest from 3 more cities and 2 additional major investors. This thing is about to scale exponentially. Hope you're ready. Was I ready? 6 months ago, I'd been one person with a vision. Now I led a team of 35, managed multiple projects, navigated city politics and investor relations and media attention. The responsibility was enormous. The pressure was constant. The possibility of failure was real. But I was ready. Because the work mattered more than my comfort. Because people needed housing more than I needed an easy life. Because I'd spent 3 years building something in obscurity. And I'd learned that you don't have to feel ready to start. You just have to be willing to figure it out as you go. I opened my laptop and started working on the presentation for next week's board meeting. The expansion plans, the financial projections, the partnerships we were developing. The tiny apartment that had been my laboratory was now a blueprint being replicated across the country. The revenge plot that had started with spite had transformed into a mission that might actually change how cities approached affordable housing. That was the thing about revenge I'd learned. The best kind didn't destroy the people who'd wronged you. It built something so significant that their mockery became irrelevant. It turned their dismissal into a compliment. Proof that you were doing something so innovative they couldn't recognize it. My brother had laughed when I couldn't afford rent, but that laughter had become the soundtrack to my success. Every time I remembered it, I felt not shame but determination. Not hurt but purpose. Because I'd taken that moment, that humiliating, painful moment, and used it as fuel to build something that mattered. And now, when people talked about my tiny apartment, they didn't talk about it as evidence of failure. They talked about it as the birthplace of a movement, as the laboratory where solutions were tested, as proof that sometimes the people who seem to be struggling are actually building something revolutionary. The news still went viral regularly. The documentary was being shown in architecture schools. Universities were developing curriculum based on my work. Cities were changing policies to accommodate micro-housing. And most importantly, hundreds of people who'd been priced out of their communities were now living in affordable, functional, beautiful spaces. That was revenge worth having. Not the petty satisfaction of watching someone suffer, but the profound satisfaction of building something so undeniable that mockery transformed into admiration. Not because I'd forced anyone to change their mind, but because the evidence of success left them no choice. My phone rang. "Nathan, hey," he said. "I know it's late, but I just wanted to say, today was good. Really good. Having the whole family together, no tension, no performance. That's because of you. It's because of all of us," I corrected. "You're doing the work. Mom and Dad are doing the work. We're all choosing to be better. But you started it. You refused to accept unacceptable behavior. You drew boundaries. You demanded respect. Without that, none of this change would have happened. So thank you. You're welcome. And Nathan, I'm proud of you too, for having the courage to change. That's harder than most people think. I learned from watching you. You changed your entire life when everyone said you were crazy. If you could do that, I could change my behavior. It's the least I could do." After we hung up, I sat in my apartment, my brilliant, transformative, no longer mocked apartment, and let myself feel everything I'd been, holding the satisfaction of vindication, the peace of reconciliation, the purpose of meaningful work, the hope that maybe, just maybe, one person's stubborn refusal to accept the status quo could actually change things. The revenge I'd planned had worked better than I'd imagined. But more importantly, it had evolved into something better than revenge, into transformation, into purpose, into proof that the best way to defeat your doubters wasn't to destroy them, but to build something so significant they had no choice but to recognize it. My brother had laughed when I couldn't afford rent, but my tiny apartment had hit the news and kept hitting the news and would keep hitting the news as long as people needed housing and someone was willing to build solutions. And in the end, that was the best revenge of all, not proving someone wrong once, but building something so right that their opinion became permanently irrelevant. 2 years after that Thanksgiving dinner, I stood on stage at a TED conference looking out at 2,000 people who'd gathered to hear about housing innovation. The talk was titled "The Power of Small Thinking: How 280 Square Feet Changed Everything." In the audience, front row center, sat my entire family. My parents, who now volunteered regularly with our housing program. Nathan and Courtney, who'd become advocates for intentional living and had started their own foundation supporting affordable housing initiatives. Maya, who'd graduated with her MSW and was working with our organization to connect vulnerable populations with housing resources. And scattered throughout the audience were dozens of people who lived in units we'd built. Teachers, nurses, firefighters, artists, activists, people who'd been priced out of their cities and were now back, contributing to their communities again. 3 years ago, I began. My brother laughed at me for living in a tiny apartment. He thought I was broke, failing, making bad choices. And for a long time, I thought maybe he was right. Maybe wanting to live differently was just my way of justifying failure. I clicked to a Photo of my original 280 square foot apartment. But this wasn't failure. This was a laboratory. A place where I could test whether the housing crisis was actually unsolvable or if we'd just been thinking about it wrong. I walked them through the journey, the innovations, the challenges, the expansion. But I also talked about the personal story, about family dynamics and the cost of thinking differently. The hardest part wasn't the engineering, I said. It was the isolation, being dismissed by the people who were supposed to believe in me, having my choices treated like evidence of inadequacy instead of innovation. That's why so many good ideas never get built, not because they're impossible, but because the person who has them gives up when everyone says they're crazy. I clicked to the photo from that Thanksgiving dinner. Not an actual photo, but a recreation showing a man standing, alone while others laughed. This was my lowest moment. The moment when I could have given up, moved back to doing what everyone expected, gotten that corporate job and proven I wasn't a failure. But I didn't, because sometimes the people who call you a failure are just people who can't recognize success that looks different from what they expected. And sometimes proving them wrong isn't about revenge. It's about showing the world that different isn't wrong, it's just different. The audience responded with applause, but I held up my hand. But here's the thing about revenge, about vindication, about proving people wrong. It's not actually satisfying if that's your only goal. I know because I tried it. I planned my revenge carefully. I let my family think I was struggling. I documented every mockery, every dismissal. I set them up to be proven wrong in the most public way possible. And it worked. The article went viral. My family was embarrassed. I was vindicated. I won. I paused, letting that sink in. But winning felt hollow, because revenge is empty if that's all it is. The satisfaction lasted maybe a week. And then I was left with a choice. Stay angry at what they'd done or focus on what I was building. I chose to focus on the work. And that's when something amazing happened. The revenge transformed into purpose. The tiny apartment stopped being proof of my family's dismissiveness and started being proof of solution. And slowly, my family changed too. Not because I'd humiliated them, but because the evidence of the work was undeniable. I clicked to a recent photo. My whole family at the opening of our 100th housing unit. This is my family now. Not perfect, not pretending the past didn't happen, but real. Honest, actually connected. And that's worth more than any revenge. The talk continued for 20 minutes, ending with a call to action. We've housed over 500 people in 2 years. That's good, but it's not enough. Not when millions still can't afford housing in their own communities. So I'm asking you, what problem are you watching that you could be solving? What solution are you not building because you're worried people will think you're crazy? Because here's what I learned. The people who call you crazy are usually just people who can't see what you're building yet. And by the time they can see it, you'll have already built it. So don't wait for permission. Don't wait for approval. Don't wait for people to understand. Just build. Build what matters. Build what helps. Build what the world needs, even if, especially if, no one thinks you can. The audience stood, applauding. People were crying. My family was on their feet. But the moment I'd remember forever came after, when a young woman approached me during the book signing. "Mr. Monroe," she said, her voice shaking. "I'm a college senior. I want to do work that matters, but everyone, my parents, my professors, my friends, they all say I should take the corporate job, that I should be practical, that I can do meaningful work later, after I've made money. But listening to you today, I realized later never comes, does it? If I don't choose meaning now, I might never choose it." "You're right," I said. "Later never comes. There will always be a reason to wait, to play it safe, to do what everyone expects. But if you have a vision for something that matters, you have to chase it. Not recklessly. I planned carefully, built strategically. But chase it, even if people think I'm crazy. Especially if people think you're crazy. Because the best innovations always look crazy until they work. Then they look obvious." She left with tears in her eyes and determination in her posture. And I thought, that's the real revenge. Not destroying the people who doubted me, but inspiring others to stop waiting for permission to build what matters. That evening, my family took me out to dinner. A real celebration, not a performance. Nathan raised his glass in a toast. To Riley, who taught us that success isn't about following the path everyone expects. who showed us that family means actually seeing each other, not just performing relationship, who proved that revenge can transform into something better if you're brave enough to let it. To transformation, I said, raising my own glass. To transformation, everyone echoed. Later, walking back to my hotel with Maya, she asked the question I'd been asking myself. Do you ever regret it? The way it all happened? If you could go back and have them support you from the beginning, would you? I thought about that carefully. If they'd supported me from the beginning, I might have been less desperate to prove myself, less driven to document everything, to build so carefully, to create something undeniable. The chip on my shoulder was fuel. Their dismissal was motivation. So no, I don't think I'd change it, even though it hurt, especially because it hurt. Because that hurt transformed into purpose. It taught me that I didn't need their approval to build something valuable. And that lesson, that I was enough on my own, that was worth the pain. You're remarkable. You know that? I'm just someone who got tired of being underestimated. No, she said, firmly. You're someone who turned being underestimated into power. There's a difference. She was right. Being underestimated had been my secret weapon. While everyone thought I was failing, I was building. While they mocked my choices, I was proving my concept. While they dismissed my vision, I was creating something undeniable. And now, 2 years later, I had everything I'd wanted. Not the revenge, but the meaning. Not the vindication, but the purpose. Not the proof that I was right, but the satisfaction of knowing that the work mattered. My tiny apartment had hit the news. But more importantly, it had helped hundreds of people, had inspired thousands more, had proven that one person with a vision and the stubbornness to pursue it could actually change things. That was the revenge worth having. Not destruction, but construction. Not proving someone wrong, but building something right. Not winning an argument, but solving a problem. And if my brother's laughter had been the catalyst for all of it, if his mockery had been the spark that ignited this fire, then maybe I owed him a thank you. Not for being cruel, but for being so cruel that I had no choice but to prove him. Catastrophically wrong. Some people would call that petty. I called it poetry. My brother had laughed when I couldn't afford rent. But my tiny apartment had hit the news, and kept hitting the news, and had become the blueprint for housing thousands of people. And in the end, that laughter had transformed into the sweetest sound I'd ever heard. The sound of people who'd been homeless getting keys to their new apartments. The sound of families celebrating having a place to call home. The sound of a city acknowledging that solutions were possible if someone was brave enough to build them. That was revenge. That was vindication. That was justice. But most importantly, that was purpose. And purpose, I'd learned, was worth more than any amount of revenge could ever be.